Well, good evening. I call the regular meeting of the Ames City Council for Tuesday, December 9th to order. We will move right into consent agenda. Is there any item that council wishes to pull from consent? Hearing none, entertain motion to approve consent.
Move consent.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Betcher,
Aye.
Beatty Hansen,
Aye.
Rollins,
Aye.
Corriere,
Aye.
Garten,
Aye.
Junk.
Aye.
Thank you. Move on to public forum. This is time we set aside for comments from the public on topics of city business other than those listed on the agenda. Ask people to keep their comments to 3 minutes or less. Is there anyone who wants to address council under public forum items, again, that are not on the agenda? All right, seeing none, we'll close public forum. Move on to item number 23, discussion on municipal code, chapter 14, human relations regarding civil rights protection for gender identity.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. For those in the audience, I'm Mark Lambert. I'm the city attorney. I was asked to write a memo or directed to by the council concerning a request that Senator Kornbach had brought forward asking for the council to consider adopting an ordinance that would provide civil rights protections for the protected class of gender identity. Excuse me, that such a class of people was listed in the Iowa Civil Rights Act until earlier this year when the legislature removed it, had been there for many years. As I say in my memo, the city of Iowa City has civil rights protection and for transgender people on the basis of, gender identity in their city code in cases of housing, employment, and public accommodations. The State Civil Rights Act still covers discrimination on for those types of discrimination and for race, gender, disability, religion, national origin, color, but it no longer, as I said, has gender identity as one, and sexual orientation, but no longer has gender identity as one of the categories. So Senator Kornbach has asked us to, the council to consider this. And so I've written a memo. I took a look at the Iowa Civil Rights Act. The Iowa Civil Rights Act starts off by, setting forth the law, the state civil rights law, but it has additional language where it says that, nothing in this section shall be construed to be occupying the field. And it also specifically grants the authority to local governments to add additional classes of, protected classes if they wish to local ordinances. So on the basis of that, I determined that the council does have the authority to go ahead and do this if you choose to do so. But of course, that's the council's choice whether to move ahead. So the discussion tonight is to whether to direct me to draft such an ordinance. I would likely use the Iowa City ordinance as a template, but maybe not copy it directly, but that is a starting point. And anyway, I guess that's about all I have to give.
Thank you, Mark. Questions?
Mark, maybe this is a good time before we take public input to talk a little bit about the home rule.
Sure.
This is a subject that we don't talk about that often, and certainly when we have a large number of people watching, it's sort of a good opportunity for us to explain to the community what home rule is and how it affects the relationship between state government and municipal governments.
Sure. Home rule authority is in the Iowa Constitution for cities and for counties, and it says that cities can legislate on any topic they want to, except if it conflicts with state law. Certainly the legislature, this has been established through court decisions. can prohibit cities from legislating in certain areas. And the legislature has done that in some cases. I don't have any examples off the top of my head, but I know they've done that. But where they just say cities and counties may not have local ordinances on this topic, and well, guns is an example. Cities and counties may not have a local ordinance on this topic, and any rules or policies or ordinances you have in effect now will be null and void as of the effective date of the state law. So the legislature has done that. They didn't do that in this case. In this case, I would say they did the exact opposite by sort of granting that authority to cities. But yeah, that's how home rule authority works.
So, and again, we actually have some Boy Scouts in the audience tonight. This is a good primer for them too. So city governments are not co-equal governmental units with states.
Right.
States are governments of general powers, and our authority to create ordinances is done in relationship to the state authority as to home rule. Am I saying that correctly?
Yes. Yeah, that's correct.
And what you have reminded us of correctly is the explicit preemption where the state says you should not exercise your authority in areas, and they specifically lay those out. And the gun one is a very good one. I was very opposed to that, and I've been very opposed to a lot of the actions of the legislature as it pertains to home rule. But there is also another way in which the state exercises this authority, and this is through preemption by implication.
Yes.
And could you walk us through that?
Yeah, and that's when the legislature has so kind of occupied the field, is the term that's used, occupied the field that there isn't any room for local legislation on it. It's like we the state have set out this law. We haven't expressly prohibited cities, but just by the nature of the way the law is written, it's implicit that cities do not. The Iowa Residential Landlord Tenant Act is an example of that, where there's really no room for cities to regulate in that area, but the relationship between landlords and tenants, it's set by state law, and they basically covered everything. So no doubt that is, they're implicitly saying to cities that we can't legislate on those topics, but that is the other way. It's either explicit or implicit.
And so I apologize. I did not do my homework when this first came to us as a council, and I was focused on the modification of Chapter 216, and I did not realize that the legislature also amended Chapter 4 of the Iowa Code. And could you just tell us what Chapter 4 broadly, the intent of that is?
Yeah. Chapter 4 is sort of general rules that apply. Things in there like, if a government deadline falls on a Saturday or Sunday, it rolls over to Monday. I mean, general rules that apply throughout the Code of Iowa and throughout the law in Iowa.
And so also in Senate File 418, they provided a new section 4.1A to guide statutory construction. And I'm not going to read through this verbatim, but it defines what sex is, the term woman or girl, man or boy. It defines what gender is, and it goes on to require the designation of the birth gender on things like driver's licenses. And so how does the addition of that language comport with your understanding that cities are left with the authority to regulate in this area?
I believe the change to Chapter 4, of course, it applies to things like birth certificates, driver's licenses, and throughout the Iowa Code. But what is being talked about here is adding protected class to the Civil Rights Act, and that class is gender identity, and there's a definition for that. In fact, we already have a definition in our civil rights ordinance, because human rights ordinance, because when the state added that to the state law, we added that to our human rights ordinance. So So I do not believe that that is defining sex, okay, by saying that gender identity is a protected class under the Civil Rights Act. It's not saying, you know, this is what a man is, this is what a woman is, and it's just simply saying gender identity is a protected class. I think that's really a separate issue. I don't think that section, and you might disagree with me on this, but I don't think that section would prohibit the city from adopting this.
Okay, thanks for your
Yeah.
discussion on this.
Sure thing.
Other questions? Robin, do you want or not?
Well, I guess, and I think this is for Steve. One of the questions we will be asked if we proceed is who might investigate these allegations? And I think, and council will be asked what level of civil penalty we assign. Have you thought already about who we might?
Well, I want to check on, give you some options, as I always do. And one of the issues will be if we pass this ordinance, as you know, we have a contract with the state now that does our investigations based on the Iowa code. If we add this particular protection in, they will not perform those inspections. So at least for that category, we'll have to do that in-house. The question is, should we then take on the responsibility to do investigations for all the protected classes, even in the state law? Or can we continue to have a contract with the state to do those investigations and we just handle the one area? First, I have to find out from the state if it's possible, and then we'll have to decide how we handle it, whether it's a full-blown handling investigations for all those areas or just one. And that'll depend on the availability of staff to do it in-house, or we'll have to think about it, that's what I'm saying.
Thank you. But you would be able to bring back a recommendation on, or a
I'll give you
staff
options.
report
I'll give you options and
at a future.
probably a recommendation or rationale before it. The other one is the magnitude of the penalty, because everyone wants to know about the penalty if you violate it. And I think Mark's suggesting this would be a municipal infraction, and then you have some amounts that are allowed by state law up to a maximum, is it $750?
750
With $1,000 for
repeat.
repeated offenses. And then you can certainly go lower. We've had lower penalties for other type of property maintenance codes. So you'll have to make a decision on that too. The first decision before you is, do you want to add it or not? And then we'll probably have to come back with you for those other options.
And, oh, sorry, I was gonna say, that penalty, that is paid to the city as a fine. It doesn't go to the individual that is just,
Right.
in this case, that would.
Right.
Right.
That would go to the
Right.
city, okay.
Now you might want to ask what happens past that. What is an individual who've been aggrieved? What avenues do they have past that, past the municipal infraction, if they're found probable cause?
Well, we don't have the authority to require them to hire the person back again or to, I mean, the person can always pursue a civil action against the employer, the public accommodation, and it would certainly bolster their civil action if they had a conviction on a municipal infraction in place. But that would, we don't have the authority. The legislature can do that. We can't do that.
Okay, thank you.
And this is a follow-up for you, Steve. Right now, the Iowa Civil Rights Commission is doing our investigating for us. Do we know at this point whether they are supplying us with information on?
Mark can speak to that. I think you asked the city attorney to follow up and then see if we can
Yeah,
they release that information.
I've been trying to get a hold of the director of the Civil Rights Commission. I have not been successful. I'm drafting right now the open records request that you all directed me to do. I expect to file that tomorrow. I know Paul had email conversation before the last discussion about this and didn't really get much of an answer.
So at this point, the city of Ames does not have any knowledge of what has happened to claims under the Iowa Civil Rights Act that are being investigated by the ICRC.
Right. We have data going back to, I think, 2023. Am I correct, Cassandra? But not 24. So.
Thank you.
We'll open up public comment, and I have 4 people that express interest in by orange card, and then we have 2 online or 2 on electronically. So when you go through those, I'll call your name, and then you can come up and speak. I ask you to limit your comments to no more than 3 minutes, and we'll start with Amanda Dotson. If you'd like to come, please, and you may begin. Yes, please. I'm sorry, just podium, and if you want to state your name, you may start.
Yes, my name is Amanda Dotson. First, I want you to know that I love that Ames is looking to be a community where all people are not only accepted, but also protected. I want to live in a community that believes we should provide that for all people. For those here who may believe we should oppose it, some things to consider, and I apologize if those who are gender diverse find this information unsettling or offensive. Research suggests that endocrine disrupting chemicals found in plastics, pesticides, cosmetics, and even natural substances like lavender oil and tea tree oil can interfere with hormone signaling during fetal development, potentially influencing gender identity and sexual orientation. For example, a widely used chemical right here in Iowa, atrazine, has been shown to feminize male frogs and alter reproductive development. Phthalates and PCBs, which are common in consumer products, have been linked to increased rates of gender dysphoria, particularly in male to female transitions. Prenatal hormone exposure plays a critical role in brain sexual differentiation, which may not align with genital development. Then, besides that, there are those born with identifiable genetic disorders of sexual development, of which there are at least 60 different variations that have been present since the beginning of humanity. A very common one, Klinefelter, is when males are born with an XXY chromosome. Studies show that individuals with Klinefelter have a significantly higher incidence of gender dysphoria and gender identity questioning than the general population. Additionally, this condition can affect 1 in 500 to 1,000 boys, with some studies indicating 1 in 600. With approximately 1.6 million men in the state of Iowa, that would include anywhere between 1,600 and 32 men in Iowa who could have this condition. And research has indicated that it's actually a very underdiagnosed condition because it requires genetic testing. And that's only one of the genetic disorders that people can have. So with just these statistics alone, I can't understand. I'm highly disappointed by our state, but I cannot understand why we would deny those with gender diversity equal protection under the law, especially when we know how much discrimination they are dealing with and need laws or ordinances to encourage people to treat them with the same dignity and respect that those of us with no obvious diversity are afforded. Thank you.
Thank you. And Dave Peterson.
My name is Dave Peterson, 1239 Orchard Drive here in Ames, and I'm here to advocate for you all to pass this as well. To me, this is just a fundamental question of should Ames be welcoming to all? The previous person, I share the lack of understanding of our legislature and our governor in stripping these civil rights protections. The first state in American history to actively strip civil rights protections is embarrassing. The fact that the university in town, that Iowa State University, is bound by these laws and has implemented policies that have in many ways erased trans and non-binary students, faculty, and staff is frankly equally embarrassing. And I think the city council has an opportunity here to say something about what we are, who we are as a community. And I get that the state laws bind the city. And I get that there might not be mechanisms for enforcement, and that might be a complicated question. If this is purely a symbolic statement, right? If this is purely a toothless a statement by the city council and by the city, I think that's enough. right? I think the idea of communicating to the trans and non-binary members of our community that they are whole people, that they're valued, and that we see them is worth adopting, even if it is just purely symbolic.
Thank you. I appreciate that you support that, but I would ask you please refrain from clapping. Madeline, are you? Madeline wants.
Hello, I'm Madeline. I'm going to speak a little bit off the cuff, just some things that I've been thinking about. The first thing I want to say is that I am.
Madeline, would you please address council, please? Just look at us.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. We want to hear from you.
Yeah, thank you. So firstly, I want to address that I am a transgender woman. And this tension kind of exists in all parts of my life. I'm telling you that I am trans right now to kind of just get that expectation out of the way. I carry an ID. It has a picture of what people would say that's a man's face on it. It has an M in the birth marker. I may look like a woman, but if I'm walking and someone wants to see my ID, they'll be able to see that it doesn't align with who I am. If I'm applying for housing, they will look into the records and be able to see all the different points where there might not be an M here, or maybe my name changed. And I would have to either get all of these IDs fixed, make them all consistent, or just accept however they might treat me. And this is kind of how gender identity can be discriminated against and how it's different from something like sexual orientation. This is very much a document-related thing in all parts of the field. And like, I'm kind of in an earlier state of transition. I am very stressed about changing even one of my documents, as that just opens me up to discrimination. As someone who wants to discriminate against a trans person, maybe they find us icky. Maybe they just think, I don't know, they're just uncomfortable with trying to understand us. They will look for a reason to see if we're trans. If a document doesn't line up, like one document in like a background check for a job, I might just not get that job and I won't have any way of knowing that that was the reason why. Or if I get the job and I'm getting onboarded, some things might come up about my background and they might begin to phase me out once that information comes out. It's just this tension I feel every single day that no matter how I look, no matter how people perceive me, when it comes down to it, it is just legal documents and people can discriminate against me in any way. And this doesn't even just apply to trans people. I want to be clear that this could apply to anyone. If a cis person, so that's someone who's not transgender, like say they change their name, maybe they changed something to something someone thought was feminine. Well, they could be discriminated against for gender identity because the expectation isn't lining up with reality. And I think that's all I got.
Thank you for your comments and appreciate you being coming to speak. All right, we'll go to John Christensen.
You want to say who's up next so they can be ready?
Yeah. And after John will be Carolyn Klaus. So if you could be ready to speak after John, I would appreciate it.
Hello. I'm happy to hear the support that the proposed amendment has had from the speakers so far. I can't imagine a reason why the council shouldn't add gender protections at least locally within their power, especially considering how it was the law of Iowa for quite a long time. And frankly, its removal on the state level had little justification. And I think it is simply important, sorry about that, we make sure, not only for the sake of those people currently living in Ames to have protection from discrimination, but that we remain an open community to others who may be coming in, especially considering the sizable student population. Thank you.
Thank you.
Carolyn Klaus, Ames, Iowa. It's a privilege to be a co-president of the League of Women Voters of Ames and Story County. Mr. Mayor and members, it's a privilege to address you on this matter. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization that is devoted to voter registration and voter education. It's a basic premise of the League of Women Voters' work. The United States cannot be a healthy democracy unless all members of the community can live freely and access their fundamental rights. Unfortunately, over the past few years, the League has tracked a surge to legislate and administer a tax chipping away at the rights of LGBTQ community members, particularly transgender. This represents a threat to both personal safety and, on a broader level, democracy. For that reason, the League of Women Voters of Ames and Story County urge the Ames City Council to enact an ordinance to protect against discrimination on the basis of gender equity and provide such resources as may be necessary to enforce that endeavor in that ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I have a couple more people anticipating that maybe other people that want to speak. Other people that are in agreement with what has been shared up to now, and if so, if you'd raise your hand. Okay. Are there any? Thank you. Is there anyone here who is not in favor? Okay. So before I call the last couple of people up, is there anyone who has anything fresh or new they want to add? I'm sure we could hear lots and lots of stories and recountings, but I think that council has a very good idea in terms of where those who are here. I see you. I have your card. I will call you in a minute.
Oh, thank you.
I said I had two people left. Thank you. So I think that council understands that we've received an awful lot of emails, also. And we also have a very long agenda. We have a lot of items to get to. So I want to respect your time and also council's time. So is there anyone else who feels that they want to have something to share that is actually, is unique and that you think council needs to? Yes. Then after this individual, we'll call on you and then on Senator Krimbach. And while this person's I'm not trying to constrain public input, but I think we have a pretty good idea where people stand with the issue, and we have a good information. Please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Okay. Hi, my name is Ianka Mitchell Conway. I am a resident of Ames and have been for about, I think, 4 or 5 years now. I do want to very strongly say we should add protections for all resident Ames, especially those who are gender diverse and or trans. I just want to say that, like, I think there are multiple good arguments for that, including like religious freedom. You know, people have the right to self-define their beliefs and their life as to how they want to live it. And if you say, and if you allow people to discriminate on gender identity, you are basically saying that people have the right to tell a person their subjective feeling of self and how they relate to the world, which infringes upon their right as an American to have religious freedom and to make their own philosophy and govern their life according to their personal values and pursuit of happiness. So I think there's a very good, neutral argument that people of all background can agree that it is very American to add a protection to allow us to have freedom to define our own lives. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Sandra?
Thank you. I'm going to bring my computer this time so I stay on track. I appreciate you all, Ames City Council, for hearing this issue and taking it to heart, and for everybody who showed up tonight in support of this. As we know, in recent years, government officials and candidates running for office have worked diligently to popularize slandering transgender people. Color of law crimes are a particular class of crime when a public official uses the appearance, uses a code, ordinance, statute, custom, or regulation in order to deprive the rights of a citizen. They use the color or appearance of law, the forms of law, in order to deprive somebody of their rights. Public officials, including at the federal and state level and in local areas, have made color of law crimes the norm. We don't know what to call them. We don't have something to identify them. Title 18, section, you have the United States Code. Section 241 is conspiracy against rights. That's when 2 or more persons are actively engaged in working to violate the rights of a person or class of persons. United States Code Title 18, Section 241 says that any person who uses any code, statute, ordinance, policy, regulation, or custom to willfully deprive any person or class of persons of their rights, that is a crime. And Title 42, Section 1985 of the United States Code provides a right of action to any person who has had their rights violated under color of law. Now, the question becomes, what happens when laws are on the books, but there's nobody there to enforce them? The people who are supposed to be enforcing laws, both at the state and federal law right now, or levels right now, we currently have legislative, executive, and judicial branches that are supposed to have a separation of powers that are captured by a party. So we're not actually having those protections. So I think it would be amazing and show real leadership if not only the Ames City Council can take moral leadership on this issue, and no matter what happens, no matter what kind of response happens, hold your ground. I will be there with you. As many of you know, I'm running for governor here in Iowa. I'm not trying to make this political, but this is an extremely important issue, and thank you for taking the right side of history on this. I have one more thing to close. The Iowa Civil Rights Commission, which was mentioned tonight, our Iowa Civil Rights Commission is ranked 50th in the nation. We have a rigged charge processing system that automatically rules in favor of businesses against victims. So unfortunately, unless you're at the bottom of the human rights barrel down here, we had gender identity on the books recently. I can tell you from personal experience, it was not being enforced. Media was not covering it accurately. I had one article written that was not accurate.
Sandra,
And
Sandra, can you draw your comments to close, please?
Yes. President Eisenhower in 1957 federalized the Arkansas National Guard and the 1st Airborne in order to escort the Little Rock 9 into Central School, high school, I believe it was. And that took real moral leadership. We don't have that at the state and the federal levels. And, but I think it's important to remember what real leadership looks like. And to close, as many of you know, I'm speaking a bit frantically tonight because I'm speaking from a place of PTSD. Because just down the hall in 2006, I was arrested.
Sandra, I'm sorry. I'm
This
trying
is
to- I-
this is actually really crucial, and I'll close it up real soon.
Thank you.
But there's some unresolved issues between myself and past and trauma I'm still experiencing. I actually took a break from my lawsuit that I was working on tonight. I sued the state of Iowa last year in part because of what happened to me from some local officials, local Ames officials, and the state of Iowa in the court in Polk County last year told me that the state was not liable and this had to be handled at the local level. So I request humbly and urgently, as somebody who has not recovered from more than 10 years of homelessness as a direct result of color of law crimes that happened here in Ames, please add this to the books. And I hope we can also enter into conversation about making right and restitution for the harm that I've faced and the years of homelessness and suffering and violence I faced, and show the world what it looks like to do the right thing. Don't hide behind attorneys who can take me to court and beat me because they're
Sandra,
professionalized.
Please, you're almost at 6 minutes.
Yeah,
I've given you twice as long.
thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments.
Thank you. Please engage with conversation with me on how to make that right so I can have restitution for the harm still being done. Thank you.
Senator Kornbach, you asked if you would close.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Thank you for consideration of this important matter. I will be brief and try to sum up some of the things that have been said and not said. First, the city attorney's memo identified the section of the Iowa Code that explicitly grants cities the right to enact civil rights ordinances, including those that extend the protected categories and formally denies any preemption of the field. I know of no section of Iowa Code that so clearly and explicitly reinforces your ability to exercise local control. Second, the Iowa Constitution, which we have all sworn an oath to defend, lists, quote, certain inalienable rights, including those of, quote, acquiring, possessing, and protecting property and pursuing and obtaining safety and happiness, quote, close quote. The right to be considered for a job, the right to rent an apartment, the right to service at a lunch counter, the rights to be covered by gender identity protection all fall within that constitutional scope. Now, Ralph Rosenberg, who could not be here tonight, has related that recent legislation has, quote, neutered the Iowa Civil Rights Commission, which he formally directed. The city must therefore develop its own procedures if it wants to secure the rights of all its citizens, not just transgender, against discrimination. Finally, almost finally, several sources have related the challenges to transgender youth. Many of them are targets to bullying and harassment. The percentages who consider or actively attempt suicide is far higher than for non-transgender youth. Since the state abandoned gender identity protection, the climate for them has gotten far more threatening. Many are considering leaving the state. I know that this concern goes beyond what would be covered by an anti-discrimination ordinance, but such an ordinance would go a long way to communicating the broader message that, at least in Ames, transgender people are seen, heard, welcomed, and respected. Finally, I know the cost of staff time is a legitimate practical question, but let me put that in context. Mr. Mayor, Tim, both of you at our recent Veterans Day ceremony were quite eloquent in honoring the veterans who have defended our country. They have served not just to protect our country, but also to protect our democracy and our basic human rights. Compared to their sacrifices,
Is the cost of some additional staff time going to prevent us from doing our duty to protect our citizens' liberties? I think I know the answer to that one. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Senator. With that, we'll close public comment, and let's get a motion on the table, and then we can have some discussion.
So I share in some of the sentiments that were expressed earlier about the embarrassment that was felt when our state legislature, or parts of them, made a conscious decision to strip rights away from a group of people, a group that is especially vulnerable in our state, and send a message that that group of individuals doesn't matter. And so I frankly think it's the least that we can do to move forward with this. If I was feeling embarrassed before, I feel a lot of pride tonight seeing all of you in this room, reading all of the emails that we received. So thank you. I do think this is who we are as a community. And so I would move that we direct staff to proceed with drafting an ordinance.
Second.
Okay, discussion.
Absolutely. I appreciate Amber's comments, and I am too really heartened by what I see in the room tonight. It is rare that we take that wall down to let more people in the room, and you guys really showed up tonight. So thank you very much. And I too agree that we need to send the message to our trans family members, our trans neighbors, our trans friends, and our non-binary friends that they are welcome here in Ames. So thank you.
Anything else?
I just want to say, we all have read all of your emails if you're here. We got so many of them. I don't know if we have had time to respond to all of them yet, but we appreciate that kind of input when we're making decisions like this that impact members of our community in differential ways that can be detrimental or helpful depending on what our decision is. And I, as a professor, really appreciate the concern that I see expressed for our students at Iowa State, and also just all members of the trans community here in Ames. And our support maybe could help others in Iowa know that they are welcome here, if not elsewhere.
So Mark, one follow-up question on, are there any potential consequences for us going forward with this in terms of repercussions from the federal level that we should be considering tonight?
I don't believe so. And I took a look at some language that, all the federal grants now have languages in them. And I took a look at several that, we've reviewed recently. Again, they all use this language like that you can't use the grant funds to promote gender or transgender ideology, whatever that means, right? So, but it's you can't use the grant funds for doing that. It doesn't say, the city can't do it. And, we have this anti-DEI legislation that basically says we can't spend the city money on, again, promoting transgender ideology, which I don't think anyone really knows what that means. But, this is not, providing civil rights protection to someone is not promoting an ideology. It's simply guaranteeing people their rights. So I don't think any federal grants are at risk here. And we did look into that because that was one of my other attorneys in my office, suggested that, and we did some research and looked at these.
Great, thanks for looking into that.
Sure. Go ahead.
I wanted to just clarify the point that you made, Mark and Senator Kornbach, that the legislature has given municipal governments the ability to add additional classes. I think that that's an important argument. But the challenge is, I think there's a tension that exists. You have that statement clearly appearing to create an opening, but it doesn't resolve the issue of what happens with Chapter 4, where they've clearly taken the field with respect to the definition of gender. And so the challenge I have as a council member is I don't feel like I can reach the substantive issue because the legislature has taken the field on this. And I think that this action tonight will be viewed by the legislature, and maybe they will ignore it, or maybe they will say, no, we did not intend this to be granted to municipalities. But I think the plain language of Chapter 4, I don't know how it could be any clearer that they have defined gender. And so I think that what we're doing is completely inconsistent with the authority granted under home rule. So I'll be voting against this, but because of the home rule issue.
Rachel or Emily, any comments you want to make?
I just want to thank everyone for being here tonight. I did receive a few emails individually, and I just want to, as a clarifier, that I am not a voting member of the Ames City Council. I'm here to represent the students as an of Iowa State University as an extension of Iowa State University student government. And that being said, I also recognize that just being up here means that I'm contributing to the broader discussion of things happening in Ames, and I take that responsibility very seriously, considering what I say could have a broader impact beyond the students that I'm here to represent. I believe we got a few emails from students that were in support of adding this to our human rights ordinance, and so I want to thank the students who are here tonight, as well as the students who have sent emails to all of us for their feedback and supporting their peers.
Thank you. Rachel?
I just echo what's already been said by other council members. I think this is absolutely the right thing to do. And yeah, I want to thank Herman Kornbach and the students for bringing this issue up, and Iowa City for being the first community to pass this. I think this is a good step forward for us, despite what the legislature has done.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
Rollins.
Aye.
Corriere.
Aye.
Garten.
Nay.
Junk.
Aye.
Betcher.
Aye.
Is there a motion regarding the, we need a motion and the enforcement tonight or not?
Civil
You want-
penalty.
No, why don't we come back with some,
Oh, and you'll come back with dollar amount in your report.
With some
and
recommendations.
options on inspections? So you're not really approving the ordinance now. You're directing the attorney to come back with it, with our input on those other two issues.
And could you just give an idea on timeline, Mark? Would that be early next year, in January? or-
That
obviously
would
we
be,
don't-
that would
next
be my
meeting's a week.
preference. I mean, I could have it done by the next meeting, but I'd rather have more time than that.
Yeah.
Considering the next meeting is next week. So yeah, the first meeting in January.
Yeah, just for everyone's information, because of the holidays, we moved a meeting up 1 week. So there's only 1 week between this meeting and the next meeting, and then we're done for the year. So it'll probably be, January 13th, I think is our next meeting. So that'd be the earliest it would come back to council.
But
All right.
You don't all have to come in. I mean, you can assume approval, right? Can we say that? I mean, we
Well,
will vote on it
well,
at the time, but
yeah.
you don't feel like you. Thank you.
You are well. Actually, just let us know if you're coming. We'll take the wall down again. No, to Brown's point, an ordinance has to go through 3 separate readings. And so public input would be taken on the first reading, but there's no need for repeating what was already shared. And you can assume, but there's no guarantee that something wouldn't come up that would change it. But the point is that that's a process we go through. So the ordinance would not even go into effect until sometime in February at the earliest, because of the schedule we have to go through by Iowa code. That concludes this item. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Is that?
Just thank you, everyone.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Go ahead. You want to say it?
No, thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
All right. Move on to item number 24.
Motion to continue.
Wait till
You can just continue without a report, can't you? We're still continuing.
Thank you very much.
All right, item number 24. Is there a motion to continue public hearing to December 16th, 2025 in this item?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried. We'll move on to item number 25.
Can't find Kelly. He's being run over there.
I gotta catch up with my notes anyway.
Get stampeded over there. He was here.
Probably nowhere to sit and he had to.
Should we just take 2 minutes.
Sure, we'll take a 2-minute, take a quick break and we'll reconvene in a couple minutes.
Brian?
All right, we're back in session and we'll move on to item number 25.
John can't figure it out.
Not cooperating.
25 is the text amendment, correct?
Correct, on the rock mulch. Yep.
So tonight we have presented to you a draft ordinance to change a landscaping standard for the city. At the request of ISU Research Park this fall, there was a request to consider amending our planter bed requirements where we require either ground cover or organic mulch to accept a rock in lieu of organic mulch. Council allowed for that to proceed. The intent here with staff is that the definition of where rock is allowable is pretty well understood. That the intent is not to replace actual landscaping with rock materials. You can't just use your front yard and rock the whole thing and say that's landscaping. It has to be confined to a defined planter bed, just as it would today with mulch. We think we've drafted an option for you that does make that very clear. It also preserves the prohibitions of certain types of rock materials in campus town and the university impact areas where there's limits on the size of rock to prevent being debris and hazard in certain situations. The Planning Commission reviewed this a few weeks back. They did vote recommend to not approve it to the council. In general, they were concerned it was a step back in terms of aesthetics. There was some concerns about the vegetative health. We did address that a little bit at the outset of this project, that when we had our landscape ordinance update in 2017 and a consulting landscape architect, the thought was that our organic soil requirement is the superior standard over just a mulch standard. and we still retain the organic soil requirement. So if you do choose to use rock mulch, you still have to meet the soil requirement. You can't just replace all of that with rock and say you've met our standards. So we think that the vitality will probably not be as good, but it obviously still plants survive and grow. You've seen rock planters in many areas. So we're recommending approval. And if you have any questions, happy to answer them.
Thanks, Kelly. Questions? All right, open up public input. Anyone want to address council on this topic tonight? Justin?
Good evening, Council, Mr. Mayor. Thank you so much. Real quick, I would certainly be in favor of this motion personally. Oh, sorry. Justin Dodge, Hunsaker Companies, 105 South 16th Street. Certainly in favor of this. I think about the annual maintenance of remulching beds every year on different properties. And, with time, the mulch blows away. If they don't get that annual maintenance, and rock is much more longer term, much easier for the property owners. It looks much nicer, much longer without that annual maintenance. So certainly ask for support on this. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Justin. Anybody else? All right, close public comment. If there are no further questions, entertain a motion.
Move on first.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
Aye.
Corriere?
Aye.
Garten?
Aye.
Junk?
Aye.
Betcher?
Aye.
Very good. Item number 26, hearing and rezoning with master plan from intensive industrial to general industrial for 23959 580th.
So up on the screen is the location and zoning map of the property we're talking about. Many people understand this to be the former Caramoli food processing plant out east of town. It was annexed a few years back when a property owner was looking to purchase the site and they wanted to do some redevelopment. And the city said that we would prefer to have that occur in the city to be under city direction and control rather than county standards. So the city did annex the property. A few years ago, then we rezoned it to intensive industrial to match the intent for the Prairie View Industrial Park in the general area. Since that time, the property owner has tried to re-tenant on many occasions. They've made some improvements to the property, and they approached staff this fall about what would be considerations to go to a broader list of uses, meaning they would have to rezone the property. So tonight, what's proposed is a rezoning to general industrial, but it includes a master plan. This master plan lists the type of uses that are permitted on the site. It does include a description of many of the site improvements. We're acknowledging the non-conforming parking that exists. We're talking about different types of configurations of uses that could occur on the property. Staff is supporting this because it does limit some of the more incompatible types of GI uses that we did not want to see as a gateway location into the city. It seems to be possibly able to help the owner repurpose the site and over time improve the site consistent with city standards. So if you approve this tonight, there'll be a zoning agreement that'll eventually return that includes some of the requirements to effectuate the plan that you've been presented as the master plan. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer those.
Thanks, Kelly. Questions? Can you just quick clarify? You said that the plan illustrates specific uses. Is that correct?
Right. So the plan, there's a different sheet that talks about the types of uses that are permitted on the property. The color coding on this particular diagram is meant to illustrate different types of industrial uses, some assembly uses, some of the other general retail service uses. Those are allowed uses on the property subject to special use permit requirements. If you exceed 3,000 square feet, there's also a total cap on non-industrial uses that can be on the property that the owner is comfortable with. So that's described in more detail on a different sheet that I don't have up on this screen.
So the applicant will be constrained to be limiting use specifically to what's being approved tonight, even though other options might exist under the zoning. Is that correct?
Correct. So the master plan narrows the allowed uses.
So they can't come in and so to start changing it?
So one of the ones we'll pick on is a salvage yard. Even though you could do that in a general industrial area, that is not permissible on this site because the master plan excludes that from the allowed uses.
Unless they came and reapplied.
Unless you rezone the property to remove that limitation.
Okay, thank you. All right. I'll open up public comment. Does anyone wants to address council on this topic tonight? We'll close public comment.
Kelly, could just one more beat on what the mayor's question was. So if someone went to buy this property in 10 years, and assuming this zoning hasn't changed, how would a buyer know what the allowable uses are?
So that zoning agreement will be recorded against the property. So it doesn't, so it goes when we do a master plan, you go one step further than just standard zoning. This zoning agreement says, here's a master plan that's an exhibit. I hereby understand I have to follow what's in this agreement and what's attached to this, and that will be recorded against the property.
Okay. I'm trying to remember if I've ever seen one of those in an abstract. And so this is a pragmatic point, but anything that can be done, even in the caption of that, to help the examining attorney to flag, this is a limitation on how this property can be used, would be of great help.
Yeah, I think the zoning agreement is very clear. It's a legal document that our legal department prepares.
I'm not doubting it's legal. It's the question of how it's formatted so that it helps a potential buyer to understand the limitations this property has.
I would say the reason you don't see them very often is we have not done very many commercial properties which have this sort of pseudo level of a site plan attached to it. You typically see it with single family development, where we say before it's subdivided, you're allowed to build 112 houses. You can build 27 attached and 84 detached. So that's usually what you're seeing.
Right.
This is a more refined version. We probably only have a handful of these in the city that are approved this way.
Yep, thank you.
Is there a motion on one of the alternatives?
Move alternative 1.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Corriere?
Aye.
Garten?
Aye.
Junk? Aye. Betcher?
Aye.
Edie Hansen?
Aye.
Rollins?
Aye.
Thank you. Move on to item number 27, hearing on amendment to adaptive reuse major site development plan for North Grand Mall.
Yeah, so up on the screen, we have the complete mall site plan. You can see the square that's highlighted as 2615 Grand Avenue, which is really an island parcel that is surrounded by other mall property. It is, as we noted in the report, there's really two major owners of property out here. The mall site is not under common ownership. So right to the north of this site, you see this red property line here that comes through the mall building where TJ Maxx used to be, where you have Harbor Freight, and then you have everything to the south. That's under separate ownership than the original traditional mall. Mm-hmm. So the owner of this site also owns the land around of them. So they have applied for adaptive reuse plan to change from the bank use to a fast food restaurant. There's two reasons this is here. It's a change of the site plan in terms of the configuration of the site for the drive-through access, as well as a minor reduction in parking. With an adaptive reuse plan, the council has discretionary authority to facilitate its economic reinvestment by choosing to waive certain standards. So in the past, you've set a total parking requirement from a broad range of uses. And then if there's a change, someone has to come in and propose their use, and then we reevaluate the parking. So overall, we think there's an abundance of parking on the site. The change of use doesn't trigger any more requirements. The site design does eliminate a handful of parking spaces to facilitate the drive-through. So I have a little bit clearer aerial shot here, but the plan is to reuse the bank building for the restaurant. There'll be a small seating area and then a drive-through on the north side of that restaurant. The reconfiguration is really on the east side of the restaurant, where the menu board, the drive-through is installed. New landscaping is installed in this area of the drive-through, and then angled parking is redesigned for this side of the site. So for the overall plan, we have a couple of conditions to try to help manage the drive-through. This first approach right next to the building, which you normally think I'm going to go to the building and I'm going to be able to get to where I want to go. This is really not a maneuver that can even put you in position to use the drive-through. So the conditions are really focused on the applicant directing their drive-through patrons to come from the south and approach from this direction. There's tons of queuing that way. There's no turning conflicts. It'll work really well in terms of stacking and everything at that point. What we have is some conditions that they have to put in, some, not just some striping, but some diversionary elements to keep people from thinking that they can come here and try and make a 90-degree turn, which isn't physically possible. So we're recommending approval. This has gone through a lot of iterations with staff to get to some semblance of a functional drive-through and still not impact other properties in the area. The Planning Commission did review this. They did recommend approval. There was some conversation about the configuration of the angled parking and the drive-through to the east of the building. Ultimately, they recommended approval.
Questions?
Kelly, is there a reason that we've got the island to redirect traffic around the drive-through rather than just blocking off that street as an ingress?
Can you say that one more time?
Well, so the drive-through,
Right.
we've got the added island with the star there, right?
Yeah.
To stop people from making that turn.
Right.
Is there a reason that we don't simply ask them to block off that street?
Like to just extend a median across the drive
Yeah.
aisle. Those three angled parking spaces would be pretty tricky to use if that was a dead end. But other than that, we didn't have a reason to fully close that access. So we were trying to manage it to the best of our ability with this diverter approach. That's how we looked at it.
Other questions? Can you go back to the one that one there? That was not in our packet, at least not the one that I downloaded. I misunderstood because what was in the packet, it showed, it was a plan from, I think it was their architect that showed that. I thought that they had to come, that they actually had to come in where.
The issue with what you saw is they don't have north is up on their plans.
Right.
So it's really kind of confusing.
No, I see this. So where you have the, I call it the entry to the three diagonal, it shows on the KFC drive-throughs painted on the pavement.
Mhm.
I thought that they were trying to get them to go in there, then go south, then go back north. But the other one is actually showing they're coming in at the
This-
south end and
yep.
queuing that way. Is that what's happening?
That's what we hope people will choose to do. And so they're supposed to paint striping on the ground. And I think the condition also says that they need to put up some type of directional sign. It doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be lit. Both Clayton Farms restaurant right there, they have a little directional sign telling you where to go. Bebop's clearly has a directional sign to help you get to the drive-through. So we're hoping this is what people will choose to do. Otherwise, you get into a mess up by the building if you go that way.
Okay. And you said you went through 6 iterations. There's probably 6 more you probably could go through in terms of arranging things. But anyway, you're satisfied with the layout, how things came about then?
Yeah, I think this is probably the only functional way for the drive-through to work. The only question is whether any of the other parking should be removed. If it's not functional, the applicant could choose to remove that in the future. I think the only real concern was the ADA area. We overlap.
Which the P&Z brought up.
Yeah, we overlap maneuvering areas at times, but that was probably the only real sensitive issue at the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting.
Okay. The last question, would you go back to the plan that shows the, I just saw this when you were talking about it, the property lines? So can you explain if, let's say, KFC wanted to buy property and the owner of that big parcel, which is very convoluted, decides they want to, do you see any issues in terms, do they have adequate parking for KFC and to set them up for success if they had an easement on that main thoroughfare? I'm just trying to anticipate going forward.
I can't explain how the parcel exists. There's no real record of how a landlocked parcel exists, but it's existed for a long time. There is no parking on the site to serve the building. So the
Oh, that's right.
So
That property is actually the green. That's
Yeah.
a property line, right?
Yep, that highlighted turquoise line is the property. So that parcel, even if it was sold to KFC, it necessitates reciprocal access and reciprocal use of parking on the rest of the property.
Would that have to come back to your department for approval?
Ownership change would not, because in our view as the city, the adaptive reuse plan is for the whole site regardless of ownership. So in our eyes, it's common parking for everybody, no matter who owns the property.
Okay, all right. Just trying to anticipate long-term as if you have some properties.
There's no real long-term option here. This site kind of is what it is.
All right. Open up public comment. Is anyone who wants to address council on this topic tonight? Seeing none, hearing none, declare public input to be closed. Any closing questions? Otherwise, I entertain a motion.
Move alternative 1A through E.
Thank you. Second.
Second.
Brown, thank you. All right. Roll call.
Garten,
Aye.
Shunk. Aye. Betcher.
Aye.
Beatty Hansen.
Aye.
Rollins.
Aye.
Corriere.
Aye.
Thanks, Kelly. Move on to item number 28, modifications to municipal code, chapters 4 and 19 to address personal transportation devices. Paul. And Keith.
Mr. Mayor and City Council, with the increasing popularity of personal transportation device uses, you've directed staff to bring back some ordinance language that addresses the use of these devices in Ames. Back in March, you provided some initial guidance on what you would like to see in that already, and so we've incorporated that into the draft that you have before you tonight. In addition to that, we've done some public outreach and provided that information to you as well as incorporating a lot of that information into our proposed update. And so there are several sections that are a little bit new or have been modified. I've outlined in the council action form, but I think that the one that maybe is getting kind of the most attention has to do with speed limits. That was sort of one of the bigger issues around this, is how do we make sure that people are using these devices safely in the city of Ames? So what is recommended tonight is that, what was provided as guidance from you all back in March was that the speed limit would be 20 miles per hour for anywhere aside from a roadway or in the parks. And then the parks piece was referred to the Parks Commission to take a look at a little bit closer. So we can talk about that a little bit more, but I wanted to lay that way. So if someone is riding on a road, a street, they are to comply with whatever the posted speed limit is for that street. If they are riding on paths and sidewalks, the max would be 20 miles per hour. And then the Park Commission is recommending to look at a 10 miles per hour speed limit where posted. And so that is not written into the ordinance. I want to make that clear. It is in the park rules, which the commission is authorized to set. So it is not, that number is not in the ordinances that are before you tonight. So I'll take any questions you have.
Thank you. Questions? All right, open up public comment. Does anyone want to address council on this topic tonight? Good evening, Grant.
Good evening. My name is Grant Olson. Sometimes I drive, sometimes I walk, sometimes I bike. If you were to walk into a store that sells bicycles and look for which ones have speedometers on them, you're going to find very few that do. And so just keep in mind that you'll have quite a few people who just unknowingly are violating a 10-mile-an-hour limit. It's hard to judge while you're rolling, and unless you have a friend hold up a baseball radar gun or something like that. And I'm glad that we're talking about pedestrian safety, Because what are we worried about? We're worried about person one and person two colliding. And there's an amount of force there. And we're worried about the amount of force at 10 miles per hour for someone on a bicycle. And so just by extension of the math, that means that amount of force, that we're also worried about cars traveling. To reach that amount of force, a car only has to be moving 3 miles an hour, and a pickup truck only has to be moving 2 miles an hour. And so I'm glad that we're talking about pedestrian safety. Unfortunately, I mean, this is not a park situation, but unfortunately, earlier this year, we did have a pedestrian fatality related to a motor vehicle. And so that's why this is very important. And I do plan to eventually talk about some problem spots in town where we have it, where most of this is focused on park use, but people walk places to conduct daily life. And so we have some crosswalks that are unsafe and things like that. So thank you for your consideration as we try to make Ames safer. Thank you.
Grant, just a second here. You mentioned 10 miles an hour, and as park, we're talking about, this is not just park use on this particular item. Park use is the next one. So did you have a comment on this item that, because it's talking about 20 miles an hour, not 10 miles an hour for bicycles on paths, and then also speed limit, they're expected to be basically traveling about the same speed as if they're on the street, essentially.
Right. Yeah, I'm sorry if I'm getting a little
No, I just
ahead
want to make sure
in
we
the agenda. So, yep.
just be clear on that. So your comments were more on the park issue, is that right?
Equally on the park issue, but also just general other places in town where we have people walking and we have other modes moving in close proximity.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Anybody else? Good evening, Jerry.
Jerry Neal, 916 Ridgewood Avenue. So I'm going to be commenting primarily on behalf of the Ames Bicycle Coalition and bicycle users in the city. So first of all, we really appreciate having what I consider to be a really strong working relationship with Paul Goldberg. The code changes that you're seeing here, they very heavily incorporate a lot of bicycle user input. So you should know that a lot of this really does contain some really contextually important things from the bike user community. So we do support the city manager's alternative number one. So having said that, I want to comment on three things in the code. And the first one is the one we were just tackling, which is speed. And there's such a high variability of opinions, and there's such an overlap between the parks and the streets and everything else. I thought you might find it interesting to hear what the points were that were raised in the bike community around speeds. So they looked at where you were in different places, user paths and off-street. They like the idea of cyclists moving closer to 12 miles an hour. Parks. They generally like the 10 miles an hour. For example, especially if you're in a play park, like Ennis Grove would be one of them. If you're on a larger track, what a bicyclist would consider a larger track would be Ada Hayden, then maybe we would be thinking about 15 miles an hour at certain times of day. And if you're residential or you're on street, then they want the cyclists to be running the same as what's happening on the roads. Transit streets, they wanted to keep them residential speeds, and then they were going to make exceptions. So if you're bipping down South Dakota Avenue, or you're on Highland, or anywhere there's a hill, you can have, if you're a racing cyclist in town, you can easily be over 25 miles an hour. Well, so where the heck does that leave the council or other people in trying to decide which way to go? And I think that primarily we have to look at a couple things. Consistency. So we don't want Ames to be completely different everywhere than like Story County or surrounding cities. So I think that's an element to consider. And I think simplicity and communication is also kind of important here. How the heck are we going to communicate this clearly to people? Since enforcement will be tricky unless it's a lot of just personal responsibility that makes it work. So 2 more things I want to comment on. These are issues that we did not actually tackle or resolve when we were working through these code changes. And one of them is 4.83, which is a bicycle path not fixed to a roadway shall yield the right of way to all vehicular traffic traveling on the public roadways which intersect with bicycle path. And I am just completely and adamantly, and I think most bicyclists are opposed to this. A vulnerable user should not be carrying the burden, the primary burden of responsibility at crossings. It's the motorized driver who has to have the same, if not greater, responsibility. They're the ones that are in the 2,000-pound vehicle. And there's a greater responsibility with that. And I think that there should be somewhere parallel language for motorists in Ames. If we're going to have this for bicyclists, I want to see some parallel language for motorists. So we didn't obviously tackle that in the code, but I want to bring it up. And the last point to deal with is penalties. One of the things that the bike community is kind of interested in seeing at some point in time is what we call fix-it tickets. So if there's a reason that somebody is getting pulled over, their taillight is, they don't have a taillight on their bike, or they don't have a headlight, and that can happen a lot, then we were thinking about a 72-hour period where folks have a way to fix it. So rather than just jumping immediately to, oh, you have a $50 penalty or whatever it might be. And, there are issues in how that would be set up and how it would be administered. So it's another piece that came up that we discussed that I want you to all be aware of it, even though we're not specifically addressing it in the ordinance. And I think
Thank you.
that's it. Thank you very much. Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it.
Anybody else? All right, I'll close public comment. Any closing comments or questions?
Keith, Jerry brought up a good topic about the lights on the bikes, and I've had 2 near misses with cyclists who it was in the middle of the night and they had no lights on the bike, and I almost hit them. And so could you speak to this issue of the required lights on bikes, and then have you had any chance to visit with the chief police on enforcement issues?
That's been a rule in Ames already. So that's not new. Lights are required already. That was already part of the municipal code. So that's not an addition. That was already required.
Well, could you clarify? So there's additional language in section 4.16. Maybe you could clarify that. I'm not making it up. I mean, it's stuff that's underlined.
Well, I guess maybe it was headlights were required, and I don't know if that got expanded, but headlights and reflectors visible from the rear that has always been required for bicycles.
Correct. But what has changed is we had some specified feet requirements of 500 in the front and 300 in the back. So what we did per the recommendations we heard was to change it to 300 in the front, 300 in the back. And then we also added some language saying that if you are riding in personal transportation devices, when from sunset to sunrise, you should provide sufficient lighting as well. So that would be new added to the new transportation devices.
But there was already a rule for
Yes.
lights. So
Yeah.
I guess we'd already had to enforce that before.
So I apologize. Let me try my question again. So I don't know that we're enforcing this. And could you speak to the issue of enforcement? Because I'm worried that someone's going to be hurt. And so again, it doesn't do us any good to have these rules if we don't have some kind of teeth to them. Could you speak to that?
Yeah, I think that is definitely a challenge, right? We unless someone's notoriously doing it, or we're kind of catching them doing it repeatedly, I think it'd be really hard to spot someone out in the park riding without a light on at sunset. So I think that is part of the challenge. I think what this allows us to do is give some guidance on what we expect and hope that folks are abiding by that. But I agree, there is a challenge on the enforcement side.
Yeah, I want to suggest that it's not being followed and it's not being enforced, and I worry about a cyclist being killed because the car always wins. Thanks.
Yep.
Pa, do we have any concerns about the consistency of speed limit? Jerry mentioned that as something that's important to the bike community, and it seems like a 10-mile-an-hour speed limit in the parks and a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit on the trails is not consistent.
Yeah, I can see how that gets really tricky. Part of the plan with the parks is that we would be posting them. And so you would visibly probably ride by a popular trail where you're supposed to slow down. I think there is a really important educational component that follows the passing of this ordinance to really do some re-education to the community as well.
Is there a reason that we didn't split the difference and just say 15 miles on park paths and every other trail in Ames?
I think just the use of it, right? So if you're riding on a trail or a sidewalk where there isn't a ton of pedestrian, it doesn't really, it doesn't seem like it would be a great idea to restrict the speed limit to something if it seems like it's appropriate for a bicycle to be moving at a faster rate. Whereas I think what we're trying to do with the speed limit in the parks is really provide that multi-user safety aspect to it. So really focusing on those pedestrian heavier areas and ensuring that folks are riding slow enough in those spaces. But
I'm just thinking
Yeah.
of signs that I've seen that say, I don't know, 30 miles per hour or 20 miles an hour when pedestrians are present. So that the idea is you've got the higher speed limit, but pedestrians change the equation and therefore you need to go more slowly.
Yeah. So I would just remind and kind of reiterate, we did do a survey just regarding park policies, and we had just under 1,400 respondents. So a lot of good information. And we asked different questions in regards to, forms of transportation. And just in regards to the parks, walking was 98% of the people that responded walk. We had 60% of the people biked, and then we had 35% either jogged or ran that responded. But when we asked them, what did you use most often? 80% of the people walk. All right. Bike use went down to 8%. So when the commission looked at this, and there's also other information in regards to some of the issues that people are facing and experiencing with it. So a lot of the people that use are the parks, the trails, the paths, whatever you want to call them, are walkers. All right. When we asked about what have you experienced or witnessed, device users, so personal transportation devices, device users not announcing their presence, almost 60% people, that was what they saw. Device users traveling at unsafe speeds, 42%. Unsafe riding, 36%. Inexperienced riders, 35%. Individuals being rude, inconsiderate, disrespectful, 28%. Trail crowding, 26%. Collisions or close calls with walkers, joggers, 25%. So a lot of these things, and this is what the commission was hearing, and with the information that they saw from the survey. And then the last question was when they asked about speed limit, should the city consider a speed limit in the parks? 78% said yes. 22% said no. And of that, 10 miles per hour got 28%, 5 miles an hour, so even slower, 23%, 15 was 14, no speed limit was 11, 20 miles an hour was 3.5, and then no opinion was 20%. So when the commission looked at all of this information and knowing that we've had people that have come to us and said, we no longer go to Ada Hayden, we don't like going to Brookside, because we feel unsafe. And because of most of our users are walkers, that's why the commission chose to say, hey, let's do 10 miles an hour. Now, there's a lot of question about whether or not can we enforce it. We talked about that on the 18th. It's tough. It's looking at a park rule. Commission didn't recommend it being an ordinance because didn't feel that was the best thing to do. So there is going to be some personal policing. There is going to be some responsibility. Now, the speedometer, Grant's about speedometer. Will people know that they're going to be going 10 miles an hour? Yeah, some people are going to go 10, they're going to go 12, type of thing. But the idea is trying to make it safe for a majority of our users. And that was one of the things that commission really looked at. So I don't know if that helps at all.
No, I am keeping in mind the input that we have received since that meeting saying, wow, 10 is so slow. I don't even know if I can ride my bike at 10 miles an hour. So having that input from you, I think outlining what the commission was considering is helpful. I also wonder if having that faster speed limit elsewhere may draw bikers to other trails rather than riding at Ada Hayden or Brookside or other parks.
Yeah. And right now we're thinking, when we've talked about, because the way the ordinance is written, 20 miles per hour unless posted, otherwise, if we post 10 miles an hour. So we're really, right now, we have talked about Ada Hayden, Brookside, through Stewart Smith, Elwood Pasture, kind of that connection between Brookside and Stewart Smith, and then probably Moore Memorial. So those are really the three areas that we have talked about. Somebody mentioned, Innis Grove, in regards to high traffic areas. I think Jerry mentioned that. We don't get a lot of people biking, using that loop because it's too short at Innis Grove. So we right now we haven't heard a lot of complaints, if any. I haven't had anybody call me and say that's a real safety issue. But Brookside, Elwood, Stewart Smith, Ada Hayden, those are probably the areas that we get the most concern with.
Other questions?
I agree with Gloria's point on this. We got an email from someone that was sort of put off that they couldn't do their bicycle training at Ada Hayden. Well, it's not a good place for bicycle training if you're trying to really improve your speed. And so to your point, I think there are lots of other trails that we have very few people out on, and frankly, they're better straightaways, there are fewer curb cuts. We have awesome options for trails. They don't have to be at Ada Hayden. So I think a point's well taken.
Other comments? Jerry made one comment about the fix-it tickets. It says in the renumbered 422 or 4.22 that there's a $50 first violation, $100 for repeat. Do we have anything in any ordinances that have that kind of a situation like that, or?
In terms of
Having instead of like a warning or giving
Yeah.
them like 3 days or 5 days to get something fixed
Yeah.
versus, slapping them with a $50 fine.
Yeah, I don't know that we have had much practice enforcing any of this, and so we could certainly build it in if that was something that the council wanted to do.
Okay. All right. There's no further questions. I entertain the motion.
And we're just on item 20.
28. Yep.
Okay.
I'll move alternative 1.
Thank you. Roll call. Is there a second? Yep. Thank you. Roll call.
Junk. Aye. Betcher.
Aye.
B.D. Hanson.
Aye.
Rollins.
Aye.
Poirieri.
Aye.
Garten.
Aye.
Okay, now we're on item number 29, modifications to code, chapter 19.
Could we add something?
Sure, go
about
ahead.
the
I'm sorry.
fix-it
I
ticket concept?
apologize. Yeah.
I like that. I would say, could I direct staff to add something that for a first offense, on a lighting violation, we allow a period of time for fixing the issue?
Is there a second?
Second.
I think it's, I mean, you know, that's a lot of money for someone who might not have a lot of funds to buy lights in the first place. And yeah, at least giving them a period of time to fix the issue would allow them to, you know, seek help to get some lights or something, right? But I hate to further penalize people, just, and again, on a first violation, so, you know.
So this is letting them come up with some suggested language and
Yes.
time period and
Yep.
nomenclature, essentially.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, all right. Those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried. Thank you, Mama. Anything else on this item? All right, 29, modifications to municipal code, chapter 19, Parks and Rec.
Yeah, so we had conversation about this on November 18th, bringing back, ordinance. There are several changes. They're all, everything was pretty much spelled out in the council action form. Some of it was just some cleanup, and then, a few, again, removing the firearms, changing that to weapons prohibited. And then swimming, that's another one that it was a park rule. Now suggesting that as an ordinance. So I guess with it, I would just entertain any questions that anybody would have about any of these specifics.
Yeah, so Keith, I happened to speak to a group of scouts last night, and one of the questions they posed that I'm happy to ask for them is that swimming is prohibited in any water. So we've had that in place with respect to Ada Hayden. But even in some of the other creeks where it's perhaps not very deep, could you walk us through the thinking on that?
Yeah. So really what we're looking at is, and I think what we were looking at is lakes or ponds on city property. Let me just check to make sure on that one. When we say body of water, creeks and Skunk River, we're really not looking at those two places. Iowa Creek, because with the Skunk River, we're actually with the Lowhead Dam modifications, we're actually inviting people to kind of wade into the water and explore things. We're doing the same thing with some of the improvements that are happening with Iowa Creek. So we're looking at Ada Hayden Lake and any ponds that are on city property, like Moore Memorial. They're just not set up for swimming.
And I certainly agree with that. But I'm just reading the plain language. It just says body of water. So that seems pretty broad. Does the scout have something that maybe we should take a look at delineating? Because I love everything you said, but I'm not sure that it's consistent with the plain language.
Yep, we can look at it. So if we change it to, and we could be a little more specific, Ada Hayden Lake or any ponds, on city property. So kind of clean it up. So creeks and rivers, people really don't swim; they'll wade in it.
Right.
So you want to try to clean that up a little bit?
Yeah, that would be great. So this is sort of a fun example where a young person made an observation and we're able to incorporate that. So to the scouts in the back, take this back to the troop and tell them that you achieved the goal. So
Any other questions or comments?
So,
Anita?
just a quick question on section 1910 that has to do with the weapons prohibited. It does include bows and arrows. And I just wondered how then this section works with our deer hunting program, since it says here it's unlawful, but I don't see any exemption language here.
Yeah, and actually this is how it had been written. And then we also have chapter 3, I believe, that talks about deer hunting and bow hunting is allowed and those types of things. So chapter 3 actually gives you those exceptions. to be able to use a bow and arrow. But that's why we did not make a change, because that's how it was. And then chapter 3 gives that exception for deer hunting.
Okay.
So that's why we didn't make a reference in here to that.
Okay, thank
Right.
you.
Open up public input on this item. Anyone want to address council on this topic? All right, we'll close public input. Any closing questions or comments? Otherwise, entertain a motion.
Move on first.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Betcher,
Aye.
Beatty Hansen,
Aye.
Rollins.
Aye.
Poirier.
Aye.
Garten.
Aye.
Junk.
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you, Pa. Thank you, Keith.
Thank you. Have a great night.
We'll move on to item number 30. Entertain motion on second reading of a zoning text amendment for the South Lincoln Sub-Area Mixed Use District SMD Single Family Design Standards.
Move on second.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Beatty Hansen,
Aye.
Rollins.
Aye.
Poirier.
Aye.
Garten.
Aye.
Junk. Aye. Betcher.
Aye.
And move on. Item number 31, entertain motion on third reading and adoption of ordinance number 4577 on rezoning property at 2220 to 400 Friel Drive from General Industrial GI to Government Airport District SGA.
Move on third.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Rollins.
Aye.
Poirier.
Aye.
Garten.
Aye.
Junk. Aye. Betcher.
Aye.
Beatty Hansen.
Aye.
All right, move on to item number 32, staff report regarding developers' request for housing incentives.
All right. Good evening, City Council. So we gave you a staff report on Friday that was follow-up to our September meeting, where we were looking at the cost implications of the developer incentive request that we have for 5 projects. Back in May is when you first received the collective request, and it totals around $10 million, requested in various ways for each project. It's kind of difficult for you to kind of assess what that is. We don't really have a history of dealing with these types of incentives and exactly what priorities are for the city. So you've met twice so far to look at this. And in September, you gave us direction to look at really to try to give more meaning or more definition to actual options. Now, the options that we proposed to you are not meant to be that you have to pick the same thing for everybody, but it was really a chance to give you order of magnitude of how different types of incentives could be valued, what they could mean in terms of cost to the city. We tried to focus on really the things that could be done in the short term. So the $10 million was represented as the overall ask for the projects, not necessarily limited to what might be necessary for the first phase. So absent other direction from council, staff really focused on the 3-year horizon, something that we thought was meaningful in terms of getting some housing options started, as well as something that you can then plan into a CIP to some degree with that choice. Now, the other issue is that, I guess we covered that, so I'm gonna keep going. We had these graphics made from the May one, so I have these all available if there's questions about where the individual projects are. This is like a schematic layout of the 4 north growth development areas, some schematic ideas of different roadways, different features that were discussed in the original incentive request. So there's requests for assistance related to sewer line extensions, roadway paving, there are different types of roadway turn lane improvements, traffic signal improvements, kind of all of the aspects that go into subdivision and development are at some level discussed for different projects. And then we did the same for the south. There's 2 projects in the south that were part of this original grouping of requests. So in the report, we have a lot of detail to try to explain our assumptions to you to help you understand where you could look, how you could look at this, and then hopefully provide some direction to staff in the near future. So the options to kind of explain what we did. As I said, there's no real methodology that we've used in the past. So staff wanted to have some repeatable methodology that might be useful for now and for the future for comparison. So we chose to focus on a 3-year time horizon. We generalized the request to be similar types of things that you could provide incentives for. So one example might be a development may have asked for assistance related to parkland in a project. Well, not all projects had parkland. So taking maybe that assumption of the dollar value and assigning it to a road project or assigning it to a sewer extension or something else that might be comparable is how we did that. So it's not that you couldn't fund a park acquisition or something. It's just we wanted to have as many comparable examples to make it more contextual to you as we could. That was the approach that we took. Option 1 really starts at the lowest level of assistance probably. In September, we offered you a table that described pioneer infrastructure and oversizing. Those are concepts that came from Ames Plan 2040. Pioneer was thought of as major infrastructure projects that open up a broad area for development. They might literally close a gap between an area of development in the city, or they may be of such size or magnitude that they serve a broad growth area itself and have multiple developments that would benefit from that type of a project. Oversizing is more standard. It's an oversized facility that serves others beyond the development. And the reason those were categorized differently is Pioneer was presumed in Plan 2040 that the council may choose to pay for 100% of that cost. Oversizing is typically a percentage, I would say between 20 and 30% of that infrastructure, depending on what that infrastructure is. So within Pioneer, you have not set a policy of what financial assistance you may provide for that. In these options, when we moved to option 2 really expanded upon the Pioneer with either additional projects to be categorized that way or increase the funding. So maybe in option 1, you did not maybe you did not think of a piece of infrastructure as Pioneer, but you moved to option 2 and then you choose to categorize it as that. And then you would apply a percentage of funding to that. So that's how we built option 1 and option 2, kind of walking through the infrastructure assumptions for the most part. And then option 3, to get closer to the $10 million request, we did not create an option that funded everything. We didn't know that we needed to do that. Option 3 was to give you other specific incentive choices, kind of beyond the infrastructure. So that's where you see some options for fee waivers. You see more discussion of use of TIF. So back in September, there was no real guidelines or boundaries on what we should use. So we did eventually try to spread out and give you some ideas of different elements that could be applied depending on how you want to look at these projects. So this table is from the staff report. This gives you a sense of what funding sources could be applied to these projects. One thing that we wanted to emphasize is that as you move to option 3, we really tried to diversify the funding sources so that the city did not hit necessarily general obligation bonds significantly, or that we hit the sewer utilities significantly, causing dramatic shifts in property taxes or utility rates. The one thing that's a constant is the use of the ARPA funds. The city staff assumed that the first money spent by the city would be the $2.7 million. You could use the $2.7 million on really anything you want in the city, but it is the most obvious source of funds to do something immediately without having to necessarily impact other geo bond or utility projects that are in the CIP. So as we look through this, at the bottom of the table, I think we wanted to capture, again, kind of the distinction between the options is how much cost is assumed directly by the city. The ARPA is a constant. And then as you got into option 3, we called it indirect costs, meaning that the city is foregoing collection of something or you're offering tips. So you're not necessarily receiving that tax benefit to the city, but you're diverting it to that resource. We call that an indirect cost to the city because you're giving it back to a developer in some fashion. And then to kind of illustrate this in a different way, same total amounts in these options, and then to provide context to projects. This is how each project lays out in terms of option 1, 2, and 3. Option 3 again is based on on going beyond just infrastructure that was listed as Pioneer. Now, the first column you see is the requested. Again, no developer approached this originally as saying, this is what I need in the first 3 years. So the 3-year estimate is my attempt to understand the things that I learned from our meetings with the developers about that first hurdle for development. So I interpreted what needed to be done to allow for first phase of development. That generated that 3-year estimate. The numbers to the right, which are quote the total, those are pretty much exactly what the developers had stated originally is what they need, not in a 3-year total. So it gives you an idea that in the 3-year, if you did solely looked at the 3-year, which isn't even one of the 3 options, we estimate it was about $6.5 million of assistance, which is between 2 and 3 to at least clear the minimum hurdles for projects to move ahead. And then within each option, again, you can see how the source of funding relates to each of those below each of the projects. I think I just mentioned that $6.5 million. Back in September, we covered this ground a little bit differently. We're much higher level. We didn't really look at projects necessarily to the same level of detail. But one takeaway we had at that point in time, and this relates to the unit count that's also on this slide, you had to spend, the request was for about 2/3 of incentives at the beginning of all these projects to yield about 1/3 of the total housing. So unfortunately, there was a very high hurdle with low yield at the beginning. And then at the back end, you spend less, but you get more. So it kind of clearly showed that there is this first hurdle of development to get over, whether you're building 1 unit or 1,000 units for some of these projects. So now we're going to walk through just a quick refresher on what each of the projects are and then the options that we described there so you can understand where some of these assumptions were. So here's that schematic layout. This isn't obviously the real project design, but it does represent some of the issues for development in terms of the creek that's on the site, the kind of the general street network, parks, water, sewer, trails, all of those elements. So all of those were originally part of the request in May. This is Hayden's Preserve. You're talking about one of the larger development sites at 170 acres and over 600 units. So these are the charts that were attached in option 1. Again, we identified the key Pioneer infrastructure here. There's 2 major things going on with Hayden's Preserve that are kind of outside of the project boundaries itself. Hyde Avenue, we'll go back to this really quick. Hyde Avenue from 190th Street way here at the north, all the way down to Harrison, back in the developed part of the city. There's about a mile gap of a planned shared use path system there. Currently, the development agreements for Hayden's Preserve and the project of Auburn Trail require the developer to build those things. And in fact, Hayden Preserve not only requires frontage improvements by the developer, it asks the developer to pay for a 1/4 mile of trail that's off-site. So we looked at, again, how could the city facilitate something? We looked at that trail as a Pioneer project that could be done to benefit 2 projects. It fills a missing link of infrastructure. And that is how, with Hayden's Preserve, you see the shared use path. About 3/4 of that cost was assigned as a benefit to Hayden's Preserve. 1/4 of that was assigned as a cost and a benefit to the Auburn Trail projects. It's about 3/4 is a Hayden Preserve obligation, about 1/4 is Auburn Trail. The other issue that Hayden's Preserve has is there's a need to get a trunk line sewer, which is shown by this dotted green line here, to the west side of the railroad tracks. That sewer has been planned for over 15 years to serve the Borgmeyer property, which we're calling the Greenbrier project. Hayden's Preserve, again, in an older development agreement, has an obligation to extend that sewer. There's minimal to arguably no benefit to the first phase of that project from that sewer extension, but it was an obligation of development that they've inherited. So in this situation, we're talking about moving the alignment of the sewer and also constructing it as a city Pioneer project to take it off of the developer's plate. And then it would also benefit It doesn't unfortunately facilitate the first phase of their project directly. It moves a cost off of that first phase, but it does then connect here and allow for the eventual full development of Greenbrier. So those are the two really significant pioneer projects that are really consistent with Plan 2040 and seem to be consistent with the general approach that we've had in terms of at least option one. There's one other note we want to focus on that's here in the text. We don't represent this in any of the tables. We do believe we have the ability to renegotiate, to the benefit of the developers, the payment of the Xenia water buyout fee way back in 2013 when North Growth really was the direction that the city agreed to for annexation of the Quarry Estates subdivision, the Auburn Trail area, and then Hayden's Preserve was already in the city at that time as Rose Prairie. A Xenia water buyout agreement was done. The developer pays that fee, but it's on a per unit basis. It's at least $2,800 a unit. We think that the Xenia will renegotiate in our conversations we've had down to $4,000 per acre. So that's a substantial savings for Hayden Preserve. It'd be a $1.2 million savings for that project. Auburn Trail would be the other project that benefits from this. Greenbrier does not, because they're already in a negotiated area that's at $3,000 per acre. The Damani project has no buyout requirements, city territory, and then the Dank Bar property does not have a water buyout either because it stayed as Xenia territory. So we don't account for that as a benefit because there's no expenditure by the city, but it is a savings. I think the other key here is these pioneer projects, we are focused on ARPA funds as the primary source. So if you were to move ahead, we have funding in place to pursue those projects as soon as there's direction to do that. Option 2 builds on that. One of the issues that's, you could argue again, is an additional pioneer or oversizing thing is a traffic signal requirement that both Auburn Trail and Hayden's Preserve had from the original development agreements. They're both to contribute to the construction of a signal at Bloomington and Hyde. So in this case, in option 2, we added that as a fee waiver. If you waive that fee collection, ultimately you're going to need to use road use tax to backfill that and program that signal into your CIP using your road use tax funds. So option 2 is only a marginal increase in value because we only added the one feature that was, again, consistent with the methodology that we came up with. Option 3 is where you really expand different ideas in terms of trying to facilitate things. So we, again, are focused on the first phase. We threw a residential TIF option into this project to cover specifically the box culvert. The developer did ask for 100% of the box culvert to be covered by the city. We showed this at 50% in this proposal. Residential TIF we have not done as a city. It does have different implications than the commercial TIF that we've done. Essentially, for every dollar of TIF you collect from a residential project, only roughly 48 cents can be given back to the developer, and 52 cents have to be saved to go into a low and moderate income fund that the city can spend anywhere in the city. It could go back into the project for assisted housing, or it could be spent by the city somewhere else. So you inherit a large obligation as the city for LMI funds when you start to use residential TIF to the benefit of a residential project. A residential TIF is also limited to 10 years by statute. And it has to be based on infrastructure costs. So it's a little different than how we maybe have done economic development TIF for commercial projects, but that's how that would work. So we put that in there. We showed you a fee waiver for a certain amount of homes to talk about how a first phase could go forward. And then you can kind of see how this all comes together at a $2.8 million value. Are there any questions about assumptions for Hayden's Preserve?
Kelly, is there a reason that the stoplight, which might be considered pioneer infrastructure, isn't in option 1 as opposed to option 2?
So in option 1, if a developer already had an obligation to pay for it as a fee in their agreement, we didn't put it in there because it wouldn't have risen to like a Plan 2040 level of conversation about benefiting an area overall. But if you feel like it's a missing piece of infrastructure, then maybe you capture that as a pioneer improvement, or maybe it's an oversized, like you just kind of have to think of it differently. It's offsite. It's general access to an area. It's not specifically at the project.
Kelly, it's been a long time since we've talked about the bike trail and Hyde, and completely agree with everything you said. This is a safety issue because of the hills there. Visibility is more of a challenge. I think we talked with John Joyner about this. Is there any possibility of the bike trail going on the east side as opposed to the west side? Because the trail to the north that the county put in that goes to Gilbert is on the east side. So ideally, we would have trails, generally on the same side of the road. Are there any engineering challenges with putting on the east side? I just don't remember this.
When we built Hyde, we pre-graded a shelf on the west side of Hyde, planning for a long-term improvement on the west side, which made a lot of sense because the county was going to build their path on the west side of Grant Avenue when we did that. And then due to property acquisition issues, they flipped it to the east side of Grant.
Oh, funny.
So my understanding from engineering is it needs to be on the west side.
Okay.
There isn't really a feasible option on the east.
And I apologize, didn't remember that history of the county, and maybe they had some issues on that. Thanks.
Yeah, so they can't acquire farmland for a trail, so
That's right.
they couldn't fit it on the west side at the intersection of Grant and 190th.
Okay, thanks.
Kelly, you mentioned that the sewer going across to feed Greenbrier, unfortunately, wouldn't really be much benefit to Hayden's Preserve for their phase one. Where is phase one proposed right now?
The way I understand it, because of where there's a 8-inch sewer line that's stubbed in this general area that they can extend, and there's water line here. So east of the creek, this general area would be the first phase, and then the culvert should be part of the first phase so they could get across the creek and open up a different housing type. From what I understand, they would do single family attached or some version of a townhome on the east side, and then move into a different single family product on the west side of the creek. That's the general concept that I've heard of.
So I presume the pathway is shown because of flow line constraints?
Yeah, so there's some limits on where it can connect into the trunk line at Hyde. So this right here at Hyde is where it needs to connect into the trunk line. And then to avoid the depth of the sewer, the main issue here is the sewer is like 40 feet deep, and no engineer wants to do that at any cost. So this alignment can keep the sewer generally at less than 20 feet, which is pretty standard for construction and maintenance. Our engineering staff has looked at this. This is the rough alignment that they think is workable to get over to Greenbrier. So then the later phases can utilize that in Hayden's Preserve, but the first phase would use the sewer that's already been stubbed on Hyde.
I was just hoping there was some way that, in terms of it'd be a tangible benefit to somehow get that located where either Hayden's Preserve or Auburn Trail could take advantage of that going through the development, so to speak, and help them minimize some costs. That would be a indirect, benefit, but it sounds like that's not really.
It's not really feasible. That's one of the reasons why the balance is so tilted. You're spending $1.5 million for that sewer in the first phase, and no houses are probably built because of it. That's one reason why it's so disproportionate.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Any other questions on Hayden's Preserve? Otherwise, I'll go on to the next one.
Auburn Trail is a 70-acre site just to the south of Hayden's Preserve. They will connect at the northwest area there. We already talked about the Hyde Trail, so I don't need to revisit that. Auburn Trail has been working to redesign their project to try to increase yield. This is a result of the conservation ordinance changes. Hayden's Preserve is also going to do that. If they proceed, they would redesign from what you saw a few years ago. So Auburn Trail's request, they again benefit from the Xenia buyout, which is pretty much the most substantial thing that is proposed here with them. We talked about the path as pioneer, And then in option 2, we talk about the same traffic signal fee that is due with Hayden's Preserve is also a requirement with Auburn Trail. So staff assumed that if you were to waive one traffic fee, you would probably waive both. And so we used that in option 2 for both projects. And after talking to the developer representative, they actually said that if the Xenia buyout can be done at 4,000 an acre or less, and they can get to the higher end of their unit count, which is approaching 200, that if the city took these obligations away from them, they believe they could proceed next year with platting of their subdivision. So we showed you an option 3, but it doesn't seem like going to a fee waiver model or some other assistance is necessary for Auburn Trail to move forward. Is there any questions about Auburn Trail?
So Kelly, just to clarify, you're saying that option 3 would allow them to move forward, not option 1 or option 2?
Option 2, they said they would move forward under option 2.
Oh, okay.
Option 3 would be extra. That, again, subject to the assumptions that they can get the unit count and that we do deliver on the Xenia buyout. All right, so we're going to jump to the south for a second with the Damani 1 project. So Damani 1 was the first Damani project in the city down south. It's at the intersection of Green Hills and Oakwood. What we're focused on is this Cottonwood extension. So the developer has built a fair number of homes to the north of Cottonwood. They're nearing the end of the phases that they can build. There's still some vacant lots in that area before this extension of Cottonwood is triggered. And then as Cottonwood gets built, they would extend Green Hills further south and over here and then connect into Ansley with Lunetta Drive. So there's about 25 homes left to be built south of or on or south of Cottonwood. Cottonwood is a 31-foot residential collector street. So typically we've considered that an oversizing opportunity. It's about 25% greater in width than a standard street. So when we started to look at the project, if you just went to the basic minimum approach, you would probably look at 25% of the cost as being something the city might look at as oversizing because of the street type. But speaking with the developer, that alone doesn't approach their original request of $371,000 to really jumpstart the project. So if you were to think of Cottonwood as something more than oversizing, if you were to recategorize it as Pioneer, you thought that filling that gap was a priority regardless of the housing unit count that's going with the project, then maybe you would look at increasing the cost share. At 50%, may or may not proceed as a project in the 3-year time frame, but that it appeared that if you were to go higher, closer to the 100%, then maybe that does move the needle of getting it done. What's a little different, I did note this, is that you could call it 100% as filling a gap. About a third of it does have homes. We haven't really categorized other streets that have housing on them as Pioneer. It's not like that's a true defined policy of the city. We've talked with a lot of developers about the cost of road construction and whether they have houses fronting them on them or not. Very common theme. If there's no houses, it's a very expensive ask to build it with no return on that investment. But usually when we've been able to get driveways and houses on the street, then it starts to work financially for the project. So that's just a note we put there. It seems like somewhere between, well, as usual, if you're willing to pay for 100% of something, it probably does mean it's a go. But you would have to consider how to look at that as a Pioneer project for this. Any questions on Damani? It's a pretty straightforward street request.
Does the developer for this one anticipate putting driveways or connecting to Cottonwood?
Yeah, so in the approved plan, this segment right here on the south side of Cottonwood would have homes on it. The north side of Cottonwood would not. It's an outlot. And then this corner of the project doesn't have a home that fronts on Cottonwood. There's a detention pond on the far west side, and then there's houses running north-south on Green Hills.
So there's some direct benefit besides just being a connector.
Yeah, so about a third, I think when I looked at it, about a third of the frontage would have houses fronting on Cottonwood. So now we're going to go back to the north and talk about the bluffs at Dank Bar. This is a unique request in the sense that there's not directly single-family residential development associated with it. The site, when it came in the spring, was a 20-acre outlot. Since that time, the developer has rezoned it from ag to commercial and FSRM. So the intent is to have 3 commercial lots at the corner of Cameron and GW Carver. Columbus is this gray line right here. It's a street that will be extended through the site and connect to GW Carver. And then the remaining land to the south, you recently agreed to rezone for an assisted living project. They're submitted for their special use permit. They'll be going to the Board of Adjustment probably early next year. So since this first started, they've moved ahead with platting and zoning for the site. The request is focused on the original developer obligation, which was to do lane widening related to access of the site. So Cameron School Road through the intersection was to be widened, and then the lane going south from Cameron through wherever an access point was created for the sites, whether that was Columbus, a commercial driveway. At the time that traffic study was done, we didn't have a precise layout. So that developer estimates it's about $1.2 million to complete the lane widening necessary to facilitate the Columbus Road extension and then the development of those sites. So for option 1, we didn't categorize that as Pioneer because it was originally assigned as a developer obligation for access to the site. So we didn't propose any incentive in September related to classifying it as Pioneer. But then if you follow our methodology and you move into option 2, if you were to think of the Cameron School intersection and GW Carver as being a minor arterial and a collector street intersection, could it be classified as a Pioneer project in that it serves a broader area? If you do that, then you could use the methodology of assigning some share of cost to the city. In this case, we use this as an opportunity to look at a different funding source of commercial TIF. So in this proposal, understanding the developer's likelihood of probably being able to site a convenience store in the near term, staff estimated that with a minimum assessment agreement, maybe $600,000 of TIF could be generated over 10 years. So in this proposal, we were looking at 50% of the cost. We based it really off of the minimum assessment, not 50% of the cost. So we believe 600,000 could be generated, which happened to be 50% of the project. So in this version, either as a rebate to the developer, or if the city was to take on a road widening project, then that $600,000 would be available from TIF. And in this model, the other 50% is eventually paid by the developer to the city, or they're using their own resources to finish the project. And then if you move to option 3, same idea. If you consider it Pioneer and you want to incent it at a higher level, we used commercial TIF again. We don't believe $1 million can be generated unless more development is done. The convenience store would not generate that type of increment. The other 2 commercial lots would have to be developed. I don't know what they'd be developed with. I don't know their values, but something would have to happen there to get to $1 million. So that's what we put in. If you did a developer TIF, that's at their risk. If those developments don't occur, then you're not obligated to provide $1 million of TIF over 10 years. Is there any questions about the commercial TIF or the Dank Bar improvements?
So go ahead.
So the Dank Bar improvements, according to table 2, do not result in housing in the first 3 years. They result in the improvement of the infrastructure and the access for the commercial nodes.
Yeah, correct. So I am not categorizing the assisted living facility as residential dwellings. That is how we looked at that. We were focused originally on single family development. I think in September, council said multifamily or single family should count towards those unit counts. But the project, the zoning and the subdivision and the special use would have been submitted for that project. So it didn't appear that it was necessarily facilitating anything immediately because those were moving ahead.
Is that option 2 and 3 or just 2?
2 or 3, yeah. Any assistance, we did not say it directly resulted in housing construction.
Kelly, did you say that there's going to be potentially 3 commercial lots in that area?
Right. So again, very rough drawing when I made this. Everest right here is an extension of a street that comes down to Scenic Valley. There's 2 lots that'll have frontage on Everest, and then there's 1 lot at the corner for GW Carver and Cameron.
Did you, if all 3 of those were developed, do you think that it would generate $1 million in 10 years in funds?
It's just,
no, it's called for speculation.
yeah,
I'm just
it
curious.
depends on how quickly in 10 years they're built. And then, I mean, if all 3 lots built in year 1, probably.
Pardon me?
If all 3 lots were developed in year 1, it might work. If it takes a while to fill in all the 3 lots, I don't know that you would get to $1 million, depending on the value of those buildings.
And then the cyan colored circles.
Right.
Where was, if Stang were extended up through Greenbrier, what was the thought? Would that connect up there at Cameron School Road, or would it connect down lower?
Right. So right here at Cameron is where Stang needs to connect. So this dark gray line represents a Stang extension. So it would come in to Cameron in an alignment that allowed for that to be a standard intersection.
And is there any costs or any duplicate double costs between Dankbar and Greenbrier for infrastructure improvements at an intersection up there, or is it all being right now in Dankbar?
I think that's a little unclear. The way, so when we go to Greenbrier, we'll talk about this as well, but we can do this here. So there's a request, I believe, for $820,000 that the developer has signed to GW Carver improvements. Those were in addition to the widening of Dankbar. So exactly what the length of those widenings on the east side of GW Carver are, as well as the improvements at the intersection that might be necessary to kind of make the completion of that Stang intersection. We don't have a design. So we believe as staff, talking with our traffic staff, both projects could be independently done. So Dankbar could complete their obligation today, and it isn't going to necessarily be wasteful in terms of what Greenbrier may have to do in the future, or would have to do in the future when they get to that part of their project. The alternative, which we do mention, is if the city wanted to be involved as a corridor improvement, then we would take on the full design and make one complete improvement at one time.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be either under option 2 or option 3 for Dankbar, and for Greenbrier, we as the city could take over basically that Cameron intersection through Columbus, and then we would design that project, and then we would be implementing it. So in that scenario, if you were looking at the option 2 version, I think we had like $800,000 of ARPA funds roughly from Greenbrier associated with GW Carver, and then we had the $600,000 of commercial TIF from Dankbar and $600,000 from the developer to get to about a $2 million budget to do corridor improvements in this area.
What's a roundabout cost?
So we think that if we did take this on, there is an option to look at doing a roundabout. We estimate that the standard intersection with signals is around $2 million. We would guesstimate a roundabout at $3 million.
Okay.
With that said, if we were to pursue the roundabout, I think we would want to approach it from a cost neutral perspective and traffic. We would probably want to approach the county to contribute for the leg that is in the county. And then there's possibility that we could pursue a state grant of $500,000 as a safety grant. So with county participation and a state grant, the city could theoretically implement a roundabout for no cost increase compared to what's been defined as a Greenbrier improvement and a Dankbar improvement.
I think that's a thought. I mean, in terms of future planning, you know, it'd be so hard to go back and put one in later,
Exactly, yeah.
right? And anyway, just something for us to think about.
And if you did, to Brown's point, if you put in a roundabout, would that affect, would it reduce the need for a widening of Bloomington? Because I presume that you're widening it because you need
GW Carver.
GW Carver, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's way down south. Carver. Would you have to still do that widening for that full length? Because the widening is partly for a turn lane, is that correct?
Yeah, so there's a lot of details there that I don't think traffic engineering can say they have a full grasp of. The roundabout itself is not a widening, other than you're putting a median in and then pushing the lanes out to create the circulation system. The remaining question is the side streets that come in south of Cameron. How does access control work there? The roundabout is designed as lower speeds, which helps reduce the access controls that we want for side streets off of an arterial street, but it hasn't been designed. But that's why we say the budget is approaching $3 million to cover the normal roundabout increase, and then assume that we're still doing some level of corridor management in this area of the project.
And then is it Columbus is coming over to, you know?
So Columbus, yeah, it isn't shown, but Columbus is extending over. The Greenbrier concept is likely looking at a local street coming across there as well. It's not great. It's very tight on Cameron. It's only like 450 feet from Cameron, which is not a typical spacing. So there's some design issues there in how that corridor will work.
And would that be like just a plain stop sign versus a signal?
I don't believe city staff would. It would be a long time till that would be signalized in terms of needs in the community.
Just thinking about the cost, and the same for going Everest going north.
Everest would not be
signalized.
signalized. Yeah, that'll be a stop control.
Thank you.
So that's a great segue to the last site. So we talked about Greenbrier. Greenbrier has the highest number of requests. It's a big site. It's 150 acres. There's a lot of infrastructure related to building out this last chunk of land here on the north side of the city. So I'll just start with what we had already talked about, this sewer extension. This is the same one we talked about with Hayden's Preserve. For this, we assigned the first $1.25 million of cost as a pioneer project in terms of value to Hayden's Preserve, but then the cost of going under the railroad tracks, we assigned it to Greenbrier, and we had a $250,000 assigned to the effort to get under the railroad tracks for the sewer extension. So once it's under the tracks, at this point, it's presumed the developer will take that trunk line through their project and design around how their development would connect into that sewer line. This is the same sewer line that needs to be extended to get to the Irons. That's where the extension can go north and serve the Iron subdivision and the townhomes up there that we talked about in the spring as part of the annexation process. Then the other major infrastructure features are, we talked about GW Carver and asked for some corridor improvements here. And then Stang Road is this darker line that kind of comes back down and again connects here. So Stang Road is, as the way staff sees it, it's a collector street. It's a level lower than an arterial street. GW Carver is projected to carry more traffic than Stang. And we looked at as an oversizing commitment by the city. So to look at, it would have a shared use path along it. It would have a wider street section. That could be typically looked at as an oversizing. And we put that at, I don't remember if that was 25 or 30% of that cost. We also have asked the developer to look at options again about how could redesign of the street layout maybe facilitate housing access to again reduce that cost of just building a street that isn't useful to lot frontages. So if we can achieve that, maybe there's a reduction in cost for building infrastructure that doesn't yield houses, and again maybe we can reduce some of those things. As we looked through the options, we talked about Stang oversizing. If we don't do the roundabout, we assume that Greenbrier would pay for a quarter of the signal. Dankbar paid for roughly a quarter of that future signal, but at least 50% of that area is in the county or won't have a project that could contribute to that signal. So we said the city would pick up 50% of that signal cost. That's one of those road use tax funding sources. And then the other unique feature here is when I go back to the site layout, this sewer comes in at the northeast side. Unfortunately, the water is way down here. So you have the two necessary infrastructure pieces not connected. But there is an option at Valley View down in this area for the city to make an offsite improvement called the slip lining project. And it would facilitate development in this lower quarter section of Borgmeyer to have sewer go south. And then the remaining 2/3 of the site, I'll say, would eventually have to come up and connect to this trunk line. So if you do the sewer line project, the slip line project, it helps the first phase of single family homes in this area start off while other things are being done to prep the site for other phases of development. So we put those all into phase one. You can see those assumptions for that. It does not approach what they were asking for in terms of their needs, but that fit the pioneer and the oversizing model that we had applied throughout. And then as you go through this, we added GW Carver in for turn lanes, as we discussed with the corridor improvements. If you looked at that as a corridor, then you could add some funding in for either lane widening or to consider the roundabout option. And then option 3, again, trying to expand what was considered. We put some commercial TIF into this project as an option to address maybe that Stang extension at the northwest side of the site that they're looking for. So again, we tried to look at commercial TIF rather than residential TIF, just to kind of avoid overburdening that LMI set aside requirement. There's no commitment to commercial at this time, so the TIF rebate's somewhat speculative. The developer would be taking that on as a rebate option, so they wouldn't want that unless they knew they were platting something and doing commercial development. But that's the same reason that you're triggering that infrastructure cost with Stang, is because you're actually building out that commercial area. Staff did not have the perspective that Stang Road needed to be built through the site as the developer has proposed the project. They're looking at moving the commercial to that northwest corner. That access can come from GW Carver if that was to occur, and the Stang Road can build to the middle as they develop. If there was commercial in the middle of the site as originally envisioned, there's probably a rationale for Stang to go through so you could get to that. That is not what they're proposing. You have a non-agenda letter about that issue to address, which is different than Somerset. When Somerset was done, the city went and built Stang through the site, knowing they needed to open up the whole area. The commercial was set into the project. That would explain why you need to do that. But we did not propose to take on Stang as a city project and just build a collector street through that whole area. So that is the summary of, oh, I'm sorry, is there any other questions about Greenbrier? Okay. So we do have the summary tables again, if you want to look at those, but for tonight, what we're asking for is to make sure that we've addressed the questions that you have, and we've provided the information that you're looking for. And although we're not asking for direction tonight, if there's an interest in trying to incentivize any project in 26, there's a need to make a decision either at the next meeting or probably no later than January 13th. Even if it's to put something in your own CIP, that's happening in January. So we're looking at some direction here within the next month to know what your council interests are. So these are some of the bullets that are kind of reflected in the staff report. There were some other comments in the staff report at the end. Again, we're not saying you have to unilaterally pick option 3 for everybody. You can work through those things. They're there to provide context to different ideas. We did try to balance impacts to the city on the funding sources. So if things do get mixed and matched in a different way, we would want to have an opportunity to kind of recalibrate how we use funding sources. I think our goal was to, again, not overly impact any one source to do this. And then ultimately, it would seem that development agreements would likely be needed to implement this. Sometimes we need to have access to a property to build something. Sometimes there just might be other trade-offs that need to happen from prior agreements. Other things would need to be done. But we would need to understand a level of support that you're interested in, and then what is the priority for housing production, and would there be eventually any other needs or asks with development agreements related to any incentives?
Can you pull up the other bullets you had on the staff report?
Yeah, that'll take a second to pull that up.
Why don't you highlight those? Just make sure everybody understands what we said from the actual report.
So that's going to take a minute to pull that up if you have other questions while I'm doing that.
Kelly, I have one question regarding the various TIF sources of financing. And I'm wondering what the downside to the city is for each of those types of TIF, the commercial, the residential development rebate, and the residential LMI set aside, and what the downsides are to the developers.
So downsides to the city so for commercial TIF, I mean, it's commercial TIF. There's two different issues here. Right? One, if we take the TIF to build a piece of infrastructure, we're at risk of the TIF being generated. So staff would be very conservative on that approach, and we would not want to risk using general obligation bonds to build something to fill a gap from the TIF. So in option 2 at Dank Bar, that $600,000 was predicated on a minimum assessment agreement that we were very confident would generate that amount of money. So that would mean there is not really risk to us. When you do a developer rebate, they're inheriting the risk and the reward of actually progressing with the project. If they don't build, they don't get the rebate. And we're not at any obligation to provide a rebate if no construction happens or less construction happens than projected. So we think we would protect ourselves from being overextended with any other financial commitments if commercial TIF was utilized. Residential TIF is all the same, except for you have the extra encumbrance of the LMI. Same things all apply. It has a limited duration, but we just have to have that set aside as we go along. Does that answer that question?
So less money gets to be rebated to the developer.
Yeah. So the downside is really to the developer because of that set aside.
You have to right size it. You just have a lot less flexibility to give residential TIF for a large amount.
We don't have a choice, obviously. You can't use a commercial TIF if it's total residential areas. If you want to give TIF, you have to use that technique.
So when we read staff comments in the staff report.
What were some of those you haven't talked about?
Yep. So as we started way back in May, the requests were accepted as is. There hasn't been any thorough design work in terms of verifying any estimate. So I would confidently say that any cost we assume will be more than what I put in this report. I think we have pretty good feel for the Hyde Trail. Our staff has looked at that. The East-West Sewer, our staff has looked at that. And the slip lining, those 3 projects, our staff has looked at that and has some confidence in those estimates. But most of the other costs in here are as suggested by the development community. And there's not necessarily any engineering or design work behind those to say that. So that also relates then to, as in the 3rd bullet here, we haven't really reviewed performance for anyone. These were the requests that came in as is. There isn't really a review of anything about what the financial gap is, the timing, or any of those things. So we don't really have confidence in anything related to the dollar values of any of the options. They were really solely focused on what it cost to do something. They're not really verifiable in terms of a financial incentive in filling a gap. As we worked down the list, we were focusing on what could be done quickly. We believe that was the priority of the city in terms of near-term opportunities. I think we also came across this discussion in bullet 5 in September Some of the comments from our local development group was that there is a limit on production, probably just based on resources in the community. So we, in that 3-year table, we said that theoretically 325 units could be built in 3 years if we funded the incentives necessary for the first phases of development of those homes. So that's more than 80 homes a year. That was 110 a year. So some other resources have to be brought to the city to achieve that 110 unit production target if we're confident the representation of our local building community is accurate, which our recent production would suggest is accurate. GW Carver, Cameron School Road, we touched on that. If you decide to take that on as a city project, we would give you more information about if a roundabout was viable and what that time frame is. It would be a tight time frame of looking for partnerships in 2026 to allow for construction in fiscal year 27-28. If it's going to get stretched out beyond that, I don't know how well that fits with the planned development on the Dank Bar side and what they're going to be looking for as certainty in terms of road improvements with those projects. Overall, there's a lot of development that could be supported at over 1,400 units. That's a lot of production for the city. As we mentioned, unfortunately, at the beginning, it's a lower number with a higher cost, but that's just the way it is in terms of how infrastructure is set up. And then I think the other thing which we gave you an attachment for in this report is this is what was brought to you in May of this year. You can look at other parts of the city where development may occur, and there's just as likely of a request to come in for other parts of the city. So we gave you some of the more obvious ones in the attachment for other pioneer requests or oversizing requests that could be paving of gravel roads to the west or to the south, a roundabout out west for Lincoln Highway, looking at traffic signals for commercial development on East 13th Street or other improvements to East 13th Street. So this is not it. It's a nice, neat, and tidy package. It seems very complete, but there's a lot in here that's an assumption, and it doesn't necessarily address everything that could also show up in next year in terms of financial requests of the city. I think so. That would be the summary then of everything that I think we had covered in the report.
Got a couple other things I want to ask about. First of all, just a little bit of context. Thank you to city staff and the developers. This conversation wasn't happening 10 years ago. So I just want to note we've never had this level of conversation. So anyway, I think it's really important and a lot of work on the staff to get to this point. So thank you to the staff. I'm interested in, we've been focusing on what appears to me one side of the equation of looking at the cost side. And if I've missed this, I apologize, but Kelly, could you speak to the other side of the coin, and that's the benefit side? So we're going to be seeing increase in property tax revenues. And it's harder to quantify this, but for the Damani, Ames schools, the more housing units benefits our schools. But could you speak on I just want to make sure that we're not so focused on the cost side that we're not seeing this in the context of the benefit to the broader community. Can you speak to that?
I don't know that we really ever look at property taxes as a component in that equation. I think the way we've looked at it, at least in Plan 2040, is housing is a benefit to the general vitality of the community. Supporting more people in the community is good for business and support of job growth. I don't think we've ever, I'm looking at Steve a little bit, I don't think we've ever looked at increasing the tax base as the goal of any one project in the city, especially for a residential project. Because I would say at that, if you were to go that route, we have not captured all costs of service in this. This is your first year of development costs. This is not ongoing operational costs.
Oh, agreed. And I'm not suggesting it's the end all goal, but, and maybe this is just sort of a philosophical point. When you look at some of the things that have happened in the metro area, they've made significant investments in pioneer infrastructure, and they've benefited tremendously from increasing their tax base. And I just want to make sure that we're thinking about both sides of this. Corey, I want to ask you to help us think through, and I really appreciate when I first went through this, I didn't grasp the idea of trying to diversify the sources of funding for this. Super helpful, and I commend staff for their foresight in that. But Corey, could you do a little deeper dive for us? We're going to be looking at budgeting really soon. In fact, city staff's been working on this since August or September.
Sure.
So as we think about how we layer this onto our work here in January, could you just give us a little more depth on that?
Yeah, well, we're certainly seeing a reduction in the revenues that we've been seeing. So road use tax, for instance, is down compared to what we've seen historically. Sales tax is relatively flat. We're looking at just inflationary increases. So, coming out of COVID, we saw some pretty significant increases in our revenue. We're not projecting that. I mean, it's early in the year, but we're not projecting significant increases in any form of revenue. I think the one thing that makes this plan that Kelly and Steve have put together viable is really the ARPA money, and that's something that we've been holding on to for some important project. It feels like it's been sitting in a fund allocated for that, but in terms of excess funding from many of other funding sources, it seems like it's going to be a difficult year to come up with any excess revenue compared to where we've previously budgeted.
And thank you for that comment. I apologize, I didn't ask my question
Sure.
very well. So that's helpful. But specifically, as we think about layering these projects into the CIP, so this is coming soon.
Sure.
So how do you go about? We give staff direction, and this is something you were mentioning, Steve or John, that this is going to happen right away, and then we have to turn around and layer this into CIP. Walk us through that.
Yeah, well, I mean, Steve directs the department heads to construct the capital improvement plan, and if the council were to direct reprioritization of the projects, I mean, that's simply part of the process that we'll undertake every year. So, we do a 5-year plan, and we prepare a 5-year plan, and we try and stick as close to we can as that 5-year plan, but things change, we get different directions, priorities change. Sometimes councils change for certain cities, then the priorities change. So really that's direction from the council. It's Steve's recommended CIP, but ultimately it's the council's CIP. So really it's a layering of those things into our budget documents, and then kind of
Go
referring
to the total one. We have the total.
Yeah, so I was going to bring that
Oh,
up.
sure.
So we did
pull that
try
out.
to.
We worked hard on this, so I mean, we think we can do option 3 on all of them without negatively impacting the overall CIP significantly, because I mean, we worked hard at this. Can you pull it up so I can see it?
Oof, that might be hard. As good as I can do.
So look at the first year. Let's just talk about the first year, because the CIP, that's what I worry about, because that's what's really going to be, that's going to affect taxes right away, right? The rest is a plan. We can move back and forth. And we're almost done with the CIP, right? So you would have to layer, in our recommendation, so you have to layer. So the first year, you look at, there's no impact on general obligation bonds. You see that the first year? And we've done this really ARPA money we have, so we can move quickly on that the first year.
Yeah.
You see that?
Mhm.
So we look closely at that. Some of the impacts later on in general obligation bonds, in the third year. And then again, you can see local options sales tax. We're going to probably have, that's for basically the Hyde bike path or a multi-path. That will have to come out of the available balance of the local option tax. We won't be able to generate
No.
a lot of new local option tax to cover our costs, but we have a substantial balance. We could start drawing down that. So there is an art to this, and we put this together. We don't believe it would cause a major impact to either rates or property taxes if you stick with this.
If we went with the option 3 for all of them.
I think so. Yeah.
Yep.
Again, but you can look at the most important one is 26, 27. That's what we're the first year of, or we're budgeting for. You can see the impact on the revenue. Look at the revenue side. Can you pull it up there? It's all there. It's really just the ARPA in the first year, which we have cash already for.
Yeah.
And even in the second and third year, we think we can manage it. Now, if they come in significantly higher, then we've got a problem, and then we may have to cut out some other a project in the CIP or reduce in other areas,
Yeah.
But we did this
So for this,
in the mind of the impact of what it would have on our existing CIP, because we have about just on roads alone and traffic, what is it, about $16 million now has been
sounds
requested,
about right, yeah.
and it keeps going up. That's maintenance and new extension of roads, right? Just from the cost of the inflationary cost on new projects. So we got to be careful we keep adding to it. That affects our overall tax burden and also our rating on our bond rating, which also affects, our ability to borrow and the cost of borrowing. So we're cognizant of that.
Okay, so maybe this is, I'm answering my own question.
Okay.
But
Better than I could do, so go ahead.
Well, but by layering these on, are we pushing therefore other projects back, or are we adding on to the existing project?
The only one I think we're talking about is road use tax. Remember the road use tax? So there's the traffic signals are $400,000-$500,000. If we eliminate the responsibility for the developer to pay for their portion of those traffic signals, which we're recommending as one of those options, that would come to us, and you either have to, let's say you have 5 years in the CIP, $500,000 for 5 of them each year, and you have to add one of these now that we assume you're either going to have to slide some of those back, or we're going to have to add a 6th one on. And we don't know yet if that may affect our balance of the road use tax. But at the very worst, we would slide one of the other signals backwards. So I think that's the one that would impact sliding projects. Are there any others you think we'd have to slide? It's probably just that one. Pardon me?
Just that one.
Yeah. The local option tax, we would, but I'm not recommending you delay any of the segments of the local option tax for our bike paths that are already in the CIP. I don't want you to slide that. I'm saying dip into the available balance and use the money. Does that make sense to you?
It does. This
Okay.
is exactly what I need help with. Thank you.
Now, I don't know if you go into if we start talking about the bigger project at the intersection, when we have to look at that a little bit more closely, because, I'm talking about the roundabouts there, because to make this work and everybody pay the same contribution, we're not saying the developer would pay less, to pay the same amount. We have to have the help of the county, and we have to have that grant. If we don't have either one of those or both of those, that will significantly impact. That's $1 million more to us. That will affect our CIP greatly.
And we haven't talked about any kind of state involvement. Do you anticipate there being any kind of state?
That's the grants we will go get grants through, but it doesn't qualify for funding, I don't believe, from any state funding, other than grant funding.
Okay.
Is that what you mean?
Right.
It's not a state highway or anything.
Right, right.
Yeah, and it's not a given the safety grant's competitive.
Yeah.
It's not an entitlement.
So that would make me nervous if we plug that into the budget for next year. We don't have it. I don't know if we'd be able to come up with $1 million next year right away. We might have to slide that to the second year. I don't know. We have to think about that. That's the one that causes me some concern.
Yeah, this is sort of interesting because not only do we have the projects themselves, but we want the developers to have direction. We want the projects to start taking shape, but we also have to do this in a way that fits with our budgeting process. So the timing of this is
right. It gets to be prioritization, as you know.
Right.
These are important aspects to increase housing, but there are other projects in the CIP that deal with utilities and the streets and all those. How does it affect that prioritization?
But it also helps the developers to be able to get projects going in 2026. That's what I want to see.
And that's why we hope we put together the plan that we think will work, even up to the option 3 for everyone.
Right. Thanks.
Other questions?
Yeah, I'm just following up on what Tim said, that we really want to get housing starts. Do we have any means of ensuring that all of this money we put into it is going to result in housing starts?
That's one of the bullets, and I'm not being critical of anybody, but what we're doing here is we're helping facilitate the establishment of subdivisions, right? And the way it's portrayed here, you would offer that to developers, but development is different than building homes, right? So there's nothing in there that requires to build, that will say how many dwelling units will be built, how fast they would build, and the sales price of those houses. That's not built into this right now.
But it could be. Is that what you're saying? Or are you saying it's not?
Are you
built
saying
into
make it a
because it can't be?
It can be, and make it a condition of the incentive, whether the developer is, well, you'd have to ask what's possible, rather than demanding, you might want to ask what can they expect? If we gave it option 3, they would make a proposal back, how quickly, how much, and with sales, and you'd have to decide, does that entice you to give the incentive or not? Or allows you to compare all of the developments together. Rather than you dictating, you could ask what's possible, what they're willing to do. And that's could be as much or as little as they want to propose. And then you'd have to make the decision whether that's sufficient enough to warrant your incentive. Does that make sense? That rather than dictating, I don't think you have to, I think it's wrong to dictate a certain number, a certain price. But it's like taking proposals. If you do that, what will they be able to do? And then you'll be able to make a decision. Better position. If you want to do that, if you want to do that. Right now, it's not assumes that. It assumes we're going to help facilitate the subdivisions, and then hopefully there'll be an incentive to build the homes.
And I would suggest there's an element of good faith that we're presuming that they're wanting to build houses. That's why we're here. So
that's one thing.
Yeah.
It's just not guaranteed under it.
Other questions? First of all, I just want to, I'll have to say my eyes glazed over when I was reading over this weekend. But your explanation and this is really extremely helpful and very creative. All three of you to be commended for what you came up with, and it makes a lot of sense. My question is you made some judgments were made to not do 100% of what the request was. And so in our conversations before the meeting, you talked about the fact this is the first 3 years. And I know this may call for some speculation, but is, in your opinion, do you believe that what is being proposed, let's just say in option 3, is adequate for all these projects to get started in terms of getting launched and getting houses that there's a demand for that we keep on hearing? Does that question make sense?
Yeah,
Because it could be they could say that, well, I need an extra X, and I could go ahead and proceed. I just don't know if there's.
Yeah, I think my opinion is yes with an asterisk, like picking on Greenbrier. The slip line clearly makes a small first phase feasible and maybe a little bit larger first phase, but it isn't going to go beyond that without really phase 3, all of the phase 3 money. A lot of that stuff's in 2 to 3 years out because they're huge projects. I think Cadence Preserve is got a lot of moving parts. It seems there's a feasible first chunk on the east side, and with that culvert project really opening up a bigger first phase if that's included. Now they asked for more money than what we put in here for that culvert, so maybe that's your example of it. It's not enough even with phase 3. But again, everything was mixed together to pick any one element and say it was underfunded versus. They didn't ask for the trail on Hyde to be paid for completely. We substituted that for a different ask.
Right.
I think it's, in my opinion, there are feasible areas to begin. I just don't know how far they go.
So the next step would be, again, this came out Friday afternoon, and I think everybody had a chance to maybe look at it a little bit, but being able to digest it, and I appreciate the fact there's not an expectation for a decision to be made tonight. Maybe some direction, but not necessarily a decision. What would you say the next step would be, in your opinion? Would it be going back to the developers and saying, okay, so what, to Gloria's point, to Steve's conversation, evaluate this?
Yeah, what I would say is, I think it's say, why need more to do it all? The other way is, if this makes sense financially, it doesn't stress our CIP. You could just say, with this amount of money, what can you do? How fast? How much? How many?
Right.
And what's the
Exactly.
cost?
For each entity, each of the 5. Yeah. All right, we'll open up public comment. Does anyone want to address council tonight on this topic before we wind down?
Evening again, Council, Mr. Mayor. First and foremost, want to thank Steve, Kelly, Corey, as well as all the public works staff for all their time. Obviously, it took a lot of meetings to tease out a lot of these details and to pull all this data together. So want to start off with appreciation of their time and efforts on this. It was noted earlier that, the front side, it costs money on the front side to get that first house. And we see the exact same thing on all developments. It costs a lot to get to the first house. And then, so what you're seeing is very normal for us to see as well. So, let's see, a couple other things of note. Auburn Trail, pretty cut and dry. Greenbrier, that's a moving target. So one of the things that's really challenging for us is we don't know exactly what our layout is going to be. We don't know all the details to even figure out what the costs are going to be, to even come up with a pro forma, to even know, what this all looks like. I mean, later on, you're going to see one of the communications I think Luke sent in about moving the commercial node to the northwest corner, so just off of George Washington Carver. So there's a lot of those details that we're still working through. So we don't know. But I can tell you that the things that we do need are the slip lining that Kelly had talked about, the east-west sanitary sewer for the future phases, and then the traffic improvements off of George Washington Carver. Everything that they've listed are the first steps. And so as soon as we get into the details of that preliminary plat and that layout, then we'll be able to tease out, hey, what does this look like as a project overall? So that's a note on that one. To Gloria's point about X number of units, in exchange, I think about Auburn Trail. So I think we brought this project forward first in 2018, and we pulled it because we realized that we were going to lose millions of dollars on the project if we proceeded. And so right now we're just trying to get to projects that actually make sense to move forward. Otherwise, so adding in a whole bunch of strings and hooks, I understand, a this for a that, but we're just trying to bring lots to the market so that way we can sell them to builders, so that way they can build homes and deliver to the end users that want to live in Ames. So one of the other things, so Tim had mentioned the benefit. And so real quick, had looked at the $300 million, estimated value of the Greenbrier when it's built out. $300 million worth of assessed property. And then the city's portion per year is $1.5 million to the city budget. So there's a benefit per year in perpetuity, and then you take Hayden's Preserve, a comparable site, that's probably a little bit more than that. So, just two projects on your spreadsheet are, another $3 million a year to the general fund. So there are benefits to the city in the long term here too. So,
Mayor, can I ask one question?
Yeah, I was going to ask one question first. And you,
go ahead.
So there's a lot of moving parts on Greenbrier. We understand, and it is on the non-agenda in terms of the commercial. Are there other things that are moving parts or pieces that are related to policy or ordinances, or is it more or less just internal to you in terms of how you're working things out?
Well, so the Greenbrier is the first parcel that we've ever worked with that is RN4. So a zoning classification that isn't even defined in our code yet, but it's described in theory in the Ames 2040 plan. So we're trying to tease out what that looks like too. So yes, there's policy and there's also internal to us.
So is there anything else besides that? We're just trying to help streamline things,
yeah,
to get things moving, and we understand.
For us, for the Greenbrier, the slip lining that we've talked about in Memorial is what will open up that first phase in the southwest corner.
I'm just trying to tease out the number of moving parts. If we can get on the table, what are the parts that we are involved with, then we can try and identify those. Everything else, if that's your development team working on. Does that make sense?
It does.
And you can always follow up more if there's other things you want to think about or come to mind. You can email us as well too with the list. So
I can't think of anything else right now off the top of my head on that one.
And I think my question dovetails nicely with the mayor's, but with respect to Auburn Trail. So I'm hoping for a short answer on this because I think there could be a really long answer, but just abbreviated answer. You mentioned bringing Auburn Trail to us in 2018. And so, and I want to be really careful. I'm not asking for proprietary information about how you did your pro forma. But presuming that you had a sense of the developmental costs, you purchased that land at a certain price point, believing that this was a viable purchase. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been worth that much. So can you summarize, like, what are
The Hunsaker family bought that land in 2011. So they've owned it for a long time before I was even with Hunsaker. So I can't speak to, what the thought process was or what the cost basis was.
And that's fair.
then.
So, but when you look at, go back to 2018
Okay.
and to now, what are the buckets or what are the barriers that kept this from being viable? So were those expectations that we placed on the development costs in terms of what it takes to create a subdivision? Were they costs? I mean, we're getting it to the point of COVID. And so were there costs of development that made this prohibitive? Give us a sense of the barriers that you were talking about.
Yeah. So Auburn Trail is one that we've talked about for years. I kept thinking this is the next, it's going to happen this year. There are many, many things that all helped to make this a viable project, as well as what you're looking for within option 2. The state changed the stormwater regulations. That helped a little bit. You guys changed your conservation subdivision ordinance. That helped out quite a bit. The city staff is also looking at allowing us to have lots on Tilden Parkway. That helped tremendously. And then what you're looking at in front of you now. I think those are the four big topics that really make that viable.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you for that.
Okay. Thanks,
Very good.
Justin.
Thank you all.
Others? Keith, you can arm wrestle Luke if you want to. Who goes next?
What, did you have a card in and I didn't? I'm sorry if you didn't.
No.
Keith Arneson, 4114 Cochran Parkway. I'm representing the Damani subdivision and development. First off, Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the fact that I really do appreciate what you have already done for the development community and for Ames homebuyers relative to tax abatement. That was a big deal, and this is also a big deal. As it relates to some of the things that have been talked about tonight, Councilman Garten brought up something that's incredibly important. And I know that that the city manager's job is to control costs. I understand that. And when we sit down and we talk about these things, we try to brainstorm for solutions that went into this compilation of information, which is very detailed and very interesting, and I'm sure helps you a lot. But when we talk about that, and maybe I could switch over to Gloria's question here, when you talk about maybe the next phase of asking what a developer can guarantee, I think if you've ever owned a business or worked in a business with an owner, I think what you're asking is, can we make the phone ring? And that's difficult. And believe me, I think everybody in this room has tried very hard to do that. And also, I think you're asking, well, what element of risk are we assuming when we go into these arrangements? Try to imagine a fishing boat and you've got option 1, 2, and 3. Well, option 1 is 1 fishing pole in the water, and option 2 is 2, and option 3 is 3. Your chances are better. And is that representing the bulk of the cost for us to risk going into this market? We are in the 4th year of a housing recession. And I know that it's difficult for people sometimes, if you're not involved in the industry, to understand that, because the stock market's doing well. If you've got a job, most of the time, certainly in this community, I think you're fairly well protected and buffered. I used to work for the city of Ames in a different capacity. I understood how that worked. I'm out there killing my dinner now, and it's a different world. So it's very difficult to make the phone ring. It's very difficult to give you guarantees about what we're trying to do. Are we still taking substantial risk in addition to what you might be providing? We certainly are. Do we want this to work? Yes, we do. let me give you another example. In my particular community, 52 feet of city street is producing a home. The average price of a home that I have sold out of my 30 homes in the South End is $642,500. Now, if you want to estimate what the tax burden is to that buyer and what goes back to the city on a 52-foot expanse of street, you can calculate that. But I believe that it is a significant benefit to the city to see this through. So I am sure that a lot of you are conflicted about what you're doing here and what you did with the tax abatement. I am sure that you're conflicted. I will say that we are trying our very best in a difficult situation to try to produce something that leaves the community better than we found it. And I would just ask you to consider that when you look at this.
Thanks, Keith.
Do you have any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Kurt Friedrich, Friedrich Real Estate, 106th Street. I'd like to first off agree with Tim Garten. This conversation has been long in the coming, and I'm really grateful that we're here tonight having it because it's important, and we have a common goal of wanting to grow Ames and grow housing here and invite more people here. And this is how we do it. We have to engage. We have to engage in this. And I'm going to echo a comment of a former coach of mine at Ames High School, the late, great John Sletton, who always said, do your best. Do your best. At the bottom of our meet sheets, it always said, do your best. And I would implore you, if it is possible, to go with option 3 on all of these requests. There are many great projects here, and I love seeing the energy, and I'm excited about that. We need housing of all types and sizes to be created here. Do your best on this. I want to speak a little specifically on the bluffs. So this area here that we are making a request for some financial incentives here is new because the 20 acres where these improvements are adjacent to were not a part of the original bluffs. We recently just bought that property back, that 20 acres back from the Lutheran Church of Hope. This was going to be a non-taxable property for the city of Ames. In a short 12 months, we've seen incredible response. We have Quick Star identified on the corner. We have Dover Communities identified for approximately 14 acres of that 20 acres, planning to build approximately a $30 million senior living community in Ames that is much needed, that will create the churn that we talk about, where it'll free up existing housing as people move there. Both Quick Star and Dover are planned to start construction within the next 12 to 24 months. That's pretty exciting. And in total, we see this 20 acres producing approximately $50 million of new taxable value for the city of Ames. I am confident that if we wanted to perhaps broaden the TIF to include some of the residential component, we could realize that $1 million request. And what that would do is that would accelerate. And Gloria, you mentioned, are there any housing units attached to this request. Well, there absolutely are, because as we're building the infrastructure right now, we're putting in pipe in the ground under Everest. So we have to build Everest up to Cameron School Road. And then as a part of this 20-acre subdivision, we'll build Columbus. And then we have these turning lanes that we're requesting dollars for. But instead of us having to allocate dollars towards those turning lanes, we can then allocate those dollars towards building homes. And we have multifamily land on the west side of Everest that will accommodate, it's already been zoned, it's approved for 90 to 100 units. And we would love to get started with that, but without the assistance, we can't. But we could dive into building townhomes of a variety of sizes and price points that I know that the community would be excited about with the incentive. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Good evening, Council. Luke Jensen, 2519 Chamberlain. I echo the appreciation of the staff and Steve in working through this. This is a unique conversation that something that's now becoming like middle-aged. We haven't had a lot of these times about just the public and private partnerships with greenfield development. So I'll speak kind of between Bluffs and Greenbrier. So this is in particular to the corridor along George Washington Carver. We want to see that corridor completed well and safely. And whether it's a signal or a roundabout, we don't really have a strong preference. And that's why we think that would be best planned from the experts at the city. The project has become more specific or less specific to the Bluffs or to the Greenbrier and more of a regional improvement. I was thinking back, there's a 190th Street corridor plan that also had roundabouts, I believe, at 190th and George Washington Carver, and then on Hyde and George Washington Carver, and then I believe Highway 69. And so I think for a cohesive traffic plan for this north area, that's just a better suited area to start really well and have a great plan, and then continue that as we move through the community. Last thing is, I think all the projects that we've kind of discussed today are important projects to the community, and it's also a lot of work. There may be other ones that come up, but I think over the last 12 to 24 months that we've been kind of working through this process, whether it be annexation or plating, we keep our eye on other opportunities in the community for areas to grow and expand and to bring new housing types. And currently, we're not seeing a great spot where that can be. That's why you're seeing so much energy and focus, particularly on the north side. And I think working together to have a really great plan with these different neighborhoods and traffic improvements makes a lot of sense. Happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Lou.
Good evening, Casey Schafbo with ATI Group. I am here representing the Hayden's Preserve project. I guess I want to echo a lot of what's been said already. We really appreciate the cooperation. This has been a lot of work. We've had a lot of meetings about kind of what is needed to move our projects forward, and I think we are getting somewhere. We bought this property, or our group bought this property in 2014. So we have, I don't know how many attempts we've made at putting together a plan that works, but we have, it's been several. You guys have seen several of them. We've had a lot of late nights, but we're really excited to be able to move something forward. And with the incentives that we're talking about and with some of the barriers being removed, we are pretty confident that we can. So yeah, not a lot more to add, but I would be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thanks for coming. Appreciate it. Anybody else? All right, we'll close public input.
Kelly, could you remind us, and if you don't have this, that's okay, but do you have a sense of where we are on our 2040 plan in terms of the number of housing units that have been built? Are we, where we are? And I should have asked you this in advance, but do you have a guesstimate on, are we on track? Are we behind?
So we didn't, I always phrase this very specifically. We didn't have a target per year. We had an average of if everything was realized in the plan. So if you were to fully build out the plan for 15,000 people, that was about 6,000 housing units, which was about 300 dwelling units a year, mixed between multifamily and single family. And that was greenfield, that was infill, that was everything. So that was the target through 2040. We're not even close to averaging 300 a year because we came out of COVID at that point in time. And as Keith said, you hit a housing recession with mortgage rates that went up to numbers people forgot about. So no, we haven't even been close to 300 a year.
And I bring that up only just to remind ourselves that this is part of a much larger conversation we had with the 2040 plan. And I just think it's important that we keep that in mind. One of the things that I really appreciated as the developers shared tonight is just how grateful I am that we're working with local developers. These are people who have skin in the game and have long-term commitments to the community. And there's just a tremendous amount of good faith that is evidenced by people who have this kind of long-term relationship with our community. I just wanted to just point that out. This is a conversation that's different. You've got people from out of state that really don't have any skin in the game. So we just really appreciate that local aspect.
Okay, council, what's,
We're not asking for any.
no, but the point is, we talked about some direction potentially, and is there more information that we would like to get from staff or from ask questions of the developers before our next meeting, before our next time we bring this up?
So would you want us to give direction on one of the options?
No, I think that
Tonight?
Sure.
No,
I
it's
want
not.
you to absorb this, get more public feedback, and then you can make a decision.
Okay.
Is the 13th of January soon enough for that to happen, or does it need to be next week?
Well, if you're going to make a major change that's going to affect the CIP, that's why I keep saying, I think we can handle option 3 for everybody without dismantling or
The
causing
CIP.
the
Okay.
CIP. If you want to make a major change, add a lot of.
This is sort of my point, that would there be benefit to staff? I guess, let me frame it that way. Would there be benefit to staff if we indicated that we're interested in option 3 on all the projects, so that way your staff can plan? If not, that's okay, but would there be benefit?
If you're prepared to make that decision tonight, I thought we were going to wait and make sure the public gets enough exposure to it, the developers get exposure to it.
What if, could
But
we
I-
just move to put it on the next week's agenda?
Either next week or I would recommend it either next week or, I don't know what the next week.
If you're going to
agenda-
make a major change to this proposal.
So
on
if we
option
want to
3,
do something completely different than option
Then
1,
you-
2, or 3.
then you better put it on next week, because that's going to change a lot. If I'm feeling comfortable, if you will go with all the option 3, you can wait till January. But you put it on next Tuesday, but you got to, we'll have to, and we'll see what you change. Then I'll have to come up with a new strategy for the CIP.
But if it's option 1, 2, or 3, you can do that. You can work with that.
I think I'm comfortable what you see there.
Would move we put it on next week's agenda.
Next week or the 13th? Is there a second?
We can put on next, yeah.
I'll second that.
Go ahead. Is there?
Yeah. I'm assuming you're feeling comfortable with option 3 and all of them, right?
I think there's a consensus.
Okay.
All right.
Well, then at least wait until next Tuesday, I think, so people can have impact. The developers haven't seen this yet. The public haven't seen it, so I feel more comfortable. At least wait until next Tuesday.
Sure.
Okay. Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried.
Okay. So the motion is the next Tuesday.
Tuesday.
Just please.
No new report.
No.
Same thing. Thank you. And was there anything else that you were looking for from anybody else beyond staff or anything for next week? The answer is no.
No.
Okay.
Regarding the corridor and the roundabout concept, I assume, like you mentioned, that time is of the essence on that. Could we maybe and maybe this is for next week, but also direct you then to approach the county now?
I think we could provide the memo that we mentioned in the bullets next week, so we could explain everything that staff believes is involved. So we could provide that memo to you next week.
Great.
Before you make a decision, if you want.
That would be good.
I think you need to see that before you can tell staff to
Sure.
to go off to the
You
county. I
need a
think you need to
motion to
understand.
bring us that memo? You'll just do it.
Yes, do it. Make a motion.
I would like to move that staff bring us the memo that Kelly just referenced next week as well.
Second.
All right. You understand the motion?
So we'll
Right.
we'll just append that to this report, right, as another new attachment and repost everything together then.
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried. Anything else?
Thanks.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. All right, move on. This is disposition of communications to council. We have 4 items. The first is drinking water monitoring. Communication from John Dunn. That's just for
No action
no
required,
action
just for
required.
information for the public and you.
Secondly, is request to amend Chapter 31 Historic Preservation Districts to allow alternative-based
Alterations.
alternations based on existing.
Alterations.
Alterations.
It says alternations.
So the homeowner sent this last week. They had a pending application with the HPC last night for approval of substitute materials. The board approved it. So the request as it would apply to the requester is no longer necessary. So I don't know that, unless you want to think of it as a broader issue, I don't know that you need to do anything with that request.
Oh, what did they do? I'm sorry.
The HPC approved use of vinyl on a contributing resource last night
Oh,
through their review process.
no action. So they got what they wanted.
Sounds good.
Next is from a memo from Kelly regarding the Greenbrier development and relocating commercial area.
Put that on the agenda.
No, it's okay.
Yeah, I think that needs to go to a future agenda. It's worth conversation. You've heard from the developer a little bit. They have an interest in moving a commercial area, but there's a relationship there within the comp plan that's it's a new concept that was.
Since tomorrow's Wednesday, do we have to have it on next Tuesday or
I do not think it needs to be on next Tuesday.
give us a break in January?
January 13th.
That would probably be more comfortable.
So moved.
It's a motion to place this item on January 13th agenda.
I'll second.
Okay. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried. And then the last is just information regarding video recordings. And do you have any?
No action.
No action necessary.
Information only.
Yeah.
All right, reports governing body. Anything from Discover Ames?
No.
AREA.
I don't think we met since last time.
No, other than the annual meeting that we attended today and heard from Val Grubb, the speaker on multi-generational
Kelly.
leadership in businesses.
Okay. Story County Emergency Management, we meet next Wednesday night for discussing budget and transit.
Nothing new.
Okay. Council comments, Gloria, start with you tonight.
I don't have anything tonight.
Helen,
Nothing for me, thanks.
Nita,
Just congratulations to those that celebrated their win tonight.
thank you. Amber,
Nothing for me.
So 2 things. We had an 8-inch snow event on Saturday night, and just so amazed with the caliber of work, the teams that worked through the night. The roads were phenomenal on Sunday. But huge news that I don't know if it's appropriate for us to do a resolution or something, or just a word of thanks, but my goodness, Coach Campbell's departure is a huge deal for Ames, the best football coach our school has ever had, and his contribution to this team and what it's meant for the university and for our community is huge. And so just can't not acknowledge just sort of his contribution to this community. And so we appreciate the the work he did to build that program, and wish him the best in the next chapter, and excited for what's coming for Iowa State. But just wanted to acknowledge and appreciate his contribution to this community.
Thank you. Rachel,
Nothing for me.
Emily?
Okay, guys, I'm
Oh.
sorry.
You got it.
This is going to be a
How
lot.
long is it
Okay.
going to take, Emily?
Less than 3 minutes, hopefully. So we have a date for the spring meeting. That is March 4th. I will send a meeting also from 5 to 7. Originally, the date was April 1st, but that doesn't really work for me because inauguration for whoever the next student body president will be is on the 6th. And so we wouldn't have any time to address anything that comes up. And then I have a comment on the CIP. I know. It's about from page 122. It's about hold on, I have it pulled up. The multimodal roadway improvements, and it's the Lincoln Way and Stanton Avenue. And that's like a projected improvement of, well, it says locations, 2029/30. But that was what Senator Kuzi brought up at the last joint meeting, and we've kind of finally fleshed out what he was talking about for that. So that's, I guess, again, on page 122. And he's wondering if we can move that up and schedule it all and just what that would look like. I know, I'm sorry. And then I think that's all I have. We are hosting that School from Out East this week in basketball. So we're coming off of a big win. So I hope we can continue that energy. And that's all I have. Go Cyclones.
What was that CIP page number again?
122.
The request was to consider moving it up.
Yeah, consider moving up Lincoln Way and Stanton Avenue, and then in parentheses, pedestrian crossing modifications.
Okay. Thank you. All right. And this Saturday, 11 o'clock, Reads Across America. It's going to be cold. There's lots of snow out there. But for those of you who can make it, it is a memorable time of remembering those who are interred at both the Ames Cemetery as well as the Ontario Cemetery. And if you can even make it to the ceremony, I think you'll be touched by the somberness, but also just the dedication. And it is a multi-generational. There's young kids all the way to older adults that come and participate. So with that, entertain motion to adjourn.
Move adjourn.
Second.
All right, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you.